Chapter 127. Walking out from behind the counter, Long Houchen and the other two looked very calm. It was hard to tell if they had gained anything. Although the demon hunters outside the counter were very curious, no one came up to ask questions. This was the rule: don't pry into other people's secrets. Moreover, these demon hunters were actually more curious about the age of Long Houchen and the other two. After all, they looked too young. Generally speaking, it was normal for one to become a demon hunter at around 30 years old. However, these three didn't look like they were 30 years old. In fact, they should be quite a distance away. "Boss, why do we want to buy those two legendary equipment?" Lin Xian lowered his voice and asked in Long Houchen's ear. At this moment, the excitement on his face had disappeared and was replaced by worry. The two legendary equipment cost 570,000 merit points, and the one that Lin Xian bought for himself cost 320,000 merit points. Previously, Long Houchen said that Wang Yuanyuan and Han Yu should be prioritized. Long Houchen said, "Haven't you noticed? Legendary equipment isn't that easy to buy. It's not like we can buy whatever we want. I've seen some shops, and legendary equipment is in high demand. It's even possible that apart from the official trading center, no one else is selling it. In this case, we have to change our plan. Buy what we can and give it to whoever we can. Merit points are just numbers, equipment is real." Lin Xian said doubtfully, "But what about the icy pride? None of us can use it." Kair suddenly said in a low voice, "You're usually quite smart, why are you so stupid now? Because no one is willing to spend 10,000 gold coins for an inspection, these demon hunters who buy things don't know what the official legendary equipment is. We can't use it ourselves, but can't other demon hunters use it? You can just set up a stall and use it to exchange for the legendary equipment we need. According to the attributes of the equipment given by the other party, we can make up for it with merit points. This way we can at least have the opportunity to buy legendary equipment." "That's right," Lin Xian suddenly realized. He patted his forehead and laughed. Then he turned around and ran away. He couldn't wait to set up his stall. Just as Long Houchen had expected, the rest of the team failed to find any suitable legendary equipment on the third floor of the trading center. Lin Xian's stall was not successful either. He wanted to exchange the pride of ice and snow for legendary equipment of the space or light attribute. However, there were very few legendary equipment of the space attribute, and there were many people who needed legendary equipment of the light attribute. There were many people who paid attention to the pride of ice and snow, but no one wanted to exchange for it. However, it could be said that he had gained something this time. At the very least, Lin Xian's strength had increased further. With the Blue Flame Phoenix spiritual stove and the fire spell attached to the fire crystal staff, Lin Xian's role in the team continued to increase. His strength was enhanced by the fire dragon's wings, which was a pretty good boost for the whole team. All the way until the evening, when they still hadn't gained anything else, did everyone return to the villa. After eating dinner, Lin Xian and Sima Xian slipped out. Lin Xian naturally went to deliver the dragon crystal to Endless Night. Sima Xian said that he was going to protect him, but his real goal was naturally in the bedroom. Kair and Long Houchen sat facing each other. Seeing Long Houchen's pondering expression, Kair asked, "Are you still worried about equipment?" Long Houchen's eyebrows relaxed a bit and he said with a smile, "Yeah. I didn't think that I wouldn't be able to spend my merit points." Kair shook her head and said, "Actually, you don't have to be like this." "HM?" Long Houchen's eyes revealed a trace of inquiry. Kair said, "Don't you feel that you're a bit too eager for quick success? Ever since we monster hunters were established, even though we've experienced many difficulties and obstacles, our growth speed has left people speechless. In a short year, we went from a soldier-level monster hunters to a commander level. Actually, what we need right now isn't to continue increasing our strength at this speed. Perhaps our cultivation is still stable, but everyone's mentality is a bit restless. Hearing her words, Long Houchen immediately revealed a pondering expression. He nodded his head and said, "You're right. Continue." Kair said, "Right now, every one of us has at least radiant level equipment. We still have a lot of merit points left." "That's right, of course it's good to give everyone legendary equipment. But with our current strength, everyone might not be able to use powerful legendary equipment. Merit points should indeed be exchanged for battle strength, but it's not just equipment that requires merit point. Moreover, there are still many areas that we can improve in. I feel that, apart from increasing our strength, what we need the most right now is a period of stability. As for changing to legendary equipment, we can wait until our cultivation reaches rank 7 before we can fully change. I've asked Grandpaing. Among the commander-level monster hunters, it's already quite good for a team to have one legendary equipment. What about us? Apart from Lin Xian's equipment, your Aria of the Goddess of Light, my Sword of Samsara, and Seema's Ball of Light, which is about to be completed, will definitely advance to legendary. Yuan's Divine Spirit Shield will also advance to legendary after it has the empty silver crystal socketing. We already have 5 pieces of legendary equipment and above. Moreover, all of us have spiritual stoves. 6 of us even have synthetic spiritual stove. I dare say that if the commander-level monster hunters held an internal competition, we could even become the final champion. Today, you even defeated a rank 7 temple knight by yourself. Han, you didn't even make a move during the entire process. After saying so much, I want to tell you that our current strength is already quite strong. Therefore, you don't have to worry about improving everyone's strength." Long Houchen nodded silently and said, "Then, what do you think we should do next?" Kair said, "According to your original plan, there will be no change. We can continue to look for legendary equipment. Let Lin Xian set up a stall for half an hour every day. A legendary Pride of Ice and Snow is enough to attract attention. As long as he goes there at a fixed time every day, people who want to exchange for it will be able to get it sooner or later. We can start to use the few remaining dragon crystals to improve everyone's overall external spiritual power. At the same time, everyone will cultivate their spiritual power. Entering the Tower of Eternity should wait for a while. But with the cultivation of internal spiritual power as the main focus, we can gradually disperse the impetuosity in our hearts and gradually calm down. We need this period of time to recuperate. At the same time, we can also take out a part of the merit points for everyone to exchange for skills that they need. Promoted to rank 6, we will always need some powerful secret skills to enhance our strength. This is also a way to improve our combat power. And I think it's better to work on skills than equipment, because once a skill is learned, it can be used forever. Looking at Kair, Long Houchen's face gradually showed a trace of a smile. "You are right, you should have told me this earlier." Kair gently shook her head and said, "There is nothing wrong with your decision and plan. What's more, you are the leader of our general class Monster Hunt 64. We only discussed it in private. Don't tell them that I helped you with the idea. It's best for an excellent team to have only one voice, even if we—" At this point, her pretty face slightly blushed, but she didn't continue. Long Houchen took Kair's hand and said softly, "You are really my good wife. Let me hug you, okay?" "No." Kair exclaimed, floated to the ground, and hid to the side. Ever since they openly met in the fantasy paradise, she became much more shy than before, and wouldn't easily let Long Houchen get close to her. Long Houchen helplessly scratched his head. "Don't run away, do you think I would force you?" Kair chuckled, "So annoying, who's your good wife? You're only 15 years old and you're already so bad." Long Houchen chuckled and said, "I don't know who it was that insisted on sleeping in the same bed as me. Seems like this person is even younger than me." Early morning. Long Houchen, Kair, and their companions habitually sat in the living room to eat breakfast. Sima Xian was holding a big bowl of porridge, eating noisily. Chen couldn't help but sneak around the table and said, "Baldy, can you pay attention to your image?" Lin Xian chuckled and said, "Don't mind him, he's depressed right now." Long Houchen said, "That's right, yesterday you gave the dragon crystal to Miss Endless Night, what did she say? Also, what's with Sima?" Lin Xian said, "Miss Knight didn't want our dragon crystal. She said, you're right, the godly sword shouldn't be measured with money. You being able to make it shine again, Miss Knight is already very satisfied. If we're really willing to compensate her, in the future when she has a request, let us do something for her." Long Houchen wrinkled his brows. He would rather pay the price of a dragon crystal than make a promise to the other side. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Then make another trip today. Tell her that I can promise her one thing, but it can only be done by myself. It can't involve our team." "Okay," Lin Xian replied. Long Houchen looked towards Sima Xian, who was still trying hard to eat, and gave Lin Xian an inquiring look. Lin Xian chuckled and said, "He's been dealt a blow. He did see that little white flower, but she directly told him, 'I don't like Baldies, and I especially don't like Baldy Cleric.' Then she left and didn't even look him in the eye. Isn't this turning her grief and indignation into food?" Chen giggled from the side and said, "Sima, you can't be giving up just like that, right? Chasing a girl isn't that easy. But, no matter how I look at it, you don't have much hope of chasing that little white flower. A beauty and a beast, the contrast is too strong." Sima Xian finally raised his head. There were still a few grains of rice on his face. "Who said I'm giving up? Go gets braver the more frustrated I get. Doesn't she not like Baldies? With Brother Yao, I'll still go with you today. I'll just get a fake mask, okay? If I don't like clerics, I'll wear armor today." It turned out that in order to show that he was very cultured yesterday, this guy specially changed into a cleric's robe and went to the Sanctuary Alliance Grand Auction with Lin Xian. Hearing him say that, everyone couldn't help but laugh. Han Yu chuckled and said, "Go Sima, we'll support you spiritually. Pluck that little white flower of yours as soon as possible." Sima Xian wasn't ugly. On the contrary, he had a kind of masculine handsomeness. His chiseled face was resolute and tough. Coupled with his sturdy and stalwart figure, it was easy to give people a sense of security. Lin Xian chuckled and said, "I think you don't have to wear a fake mask. It's best to show your true colors. Otherwise, even if you really get her, if she finds out that you're not what you look like, wouldn't there be a story?" Wang Yuanyuan nodded and said, "Brother Yao is right. Since you're pursuing her, the first thing you have to do is to be sincere. Without sincerity, how can you talk about anything else?" Sima patted his bald head and said with a face full of grief and indignation, "So it's so hard to get a girl. I think it's pretty easy for the leader too." "What did you say?" Kair, who had been silent all this while, slowly raised her head. "I didn't say anything. I'm full." After saying that, the bald man fled. Kair turned to Long Houchen and said, "Is it really that easy? Then I'll make it a little more difficult for you in the future. I'm also full." After saying that, she stood up and went back to her room. Long Houchen didn't see that when she left, there was a trace of a smile in her eyes. Dumbfounded as he watched Kair leave, Long Houchen said innocently, "Aren't I being shot even when I'm not lying down?" Lin Xian chuckled and said, "Boss, I'm not the type to stir up trouble. But Sima is trying to stir up trouble between you and the vice leader. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to tolerate it." Long Houchen suddenly stood up and glanced at Lin Xian calmly. "I don't need to tolerate it." Then, he shouted towards a certain person's room, "Sima Xian, come practice close combat with me." The vice leader of the Temple League, the vice leader of the Knights Templars, and the Holy Knight leader, Han Qiu, was in a good mood recently. Ever since the Knights Templars had a genius like Long Houchen, other than dealing with various matters in the temple, He spent most of his attention on Long Houchen and his monster hunters. When Long Houchen and the others successfully passed the test and became general tier monster hunters, Han Q was really worried for a period of time. Although he was Long Houchen's grandmaster and held a high position in the Temple League, the existence of monster hunters had its own independence. Even Han Q couldn't easily interfere with the affairs of the monster hunters. The reason why Han Q sent a rank 7 Temple Knight to test Long Houchen was simple. He hoped that they wouldn't pass the general tier monster hunters test and take on a more difficult mission. Didn't the Alliance just give you 1,000,000 merit points? You guys should behave yourselves and settle down. However, he didn't expect Long Houchen to be so powerful that he could defeat the Temple Knight with his rank 6 strength without any suspense. Helpless, Han Q couldn't do anything else. Just when he thought that Long Houchen and his monster hunters would take on another mission and leave the Holy City, Long Houchen and his companions chose to go into seclusion. They hung a seclusion sign outside the villa and didn't want to be disturbed by the outside world. Moreover, this closed-door cultivation lasted for 4 months. How could Han Q not be happy with this discovery? The excellence of these children didn't make them overly confident. Under such circumstances, they still chose to settle down their strength and go into seclusion to consolidate what they learned. It could be said that they already had the mentality of a truly powerful monster hunters. These young people were actually more stable than many veteran monster hunters. Yes, Long Houchen and the others had indeed been in seclusion for more than 4 months, and they were still in seclusion. They didn't intend to end their seclusion process in a short period of time. However, today was also an important day for them. Tower of Eternity. Long Houchen, Kair Han Yu, Sima Xian, Wang Yuanyuan, Han Yu, and Chen Inger, the 7 of them were fighting in a row. "Boss, who's going to do it?" Sima Xian asked Long Houchen eagerly. Not far in front of the 7 of them was the Red Skeleton, who had been fighting and training with them, and had fully trained their close combat ability. It was because of the continuous fighting with this skeleton that they gradually mastered some of the mysteries of ancient martial arts. And today was also the day when they were determined to break through all the tests on the first floor of the Tower of Eternity. For more than 4 months, under Kai Er's reminder, Long Houchen decided to lead his companions to focus on internal spiritual power cultivation, to calm their impetuous hearts, to experience the changes in their own strength since breaking through to the 6th Order, to practice their acquired skills, to look for legendary equipment to purchase, and to use the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan's demonic crystal with various precious medicinal herbs to boil their bodies in water. The role of the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan's demonic crystal was greater than expected. After removing the impurities and dark attributes from it through some rare medicinal herbs, Long Houchen and the others could feel the powerful effect of washing the marrow and changing the tendons every time they soaked. Whether it was strength, flexibility, defense, or attack, they had all been comprehensively improved. However, every time they used it, the volume of the demonic crystal would also shrink a little until it completely disappeared. In more than 4 months, they had used 3 heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan's demonic crystal, and everyone felt that the improvement of external spiritual power was negligible. Only then did they stop soaking. However, these external spiritual power improvements were not for nothing. The supplementary medicinal herbs they used had cost them nearly 4 million gold coins and 150,000 merit points. As everyone wished, one of them was a legendary heavy sword for Han Yu, and the other belonged to Chen Ing. It was a legendary accessory called the Prayer Necklace. The legendary heavy sword was exchanged with the Pride of Ice and Snow and 100,000 merit points. Then, with the prayer necklace and Long Houchen's purchase of a Radiance heavy sword and some secret techniques, the team now only had about 50,000 merit points left. What seemed like a lot of merit points had already been squandered by them. For more than 4 months, it could be said that they had been spending these merit points, and now, they were naturally almost exhausted. "I'll do it," This senior skeleton taught us what it means to be aggressive like fire. I hope to defeat him in a one-on-one situation, so that his accompanying us for so long won't be in vain, Long Houchen said in a deep voice. Everyone had no objections, and they spread out slightly to give him enough space. With the brilliant sacred shield in his left hand and the light ripple-heavy sword in his right, Long Houchen strode toward the red skeleton that stood proudly like a mountain. The two sides rapidly approached each other. Behind Long Houchen, a golden light flashed, and 4 dazzling wings unfurled. When he was within 20 meters of the red skeleton's eyes lit up, and its 3-meter-tall body shot towards Long Houchen like a jet of flames. Long Houchen did not retreat. His footsteps suddenly sped up, and he also rushed towards the red skeleton. However, he did not use charge or assault. The distance between the two sides rapidly shortened. When the red skeleton was about 5 meters away, it suddenly crouched down, and the huge bone blade in its hand slashed towards Long Houchen's neck. Long Houchen had lost count of the number of times he had fought with it, so he naturally knew that the red skeleton's crouching action had endless tricks up its sleeves. His forward footsteps did not change, but his footsteps slowed down a bit, and at the same time, he became much more agile. He suddenly bent down, and his arms retracted a bit, dodging the red skeleton's blade. The red skeleton's legs exerted force, and its body suddenly exploded, making a half-turn. At the same time, the shield in its left hand swept towards Long Houchen with an earth-shattering force. The red skeleton's body was huge, and its shield was also extremely thick. This sweep made Long Houchen feel that he could not avoid it. Of course, Long Houchen could use his spiritual wings to fly, but he did not do so. Within the Tower of Eternity, height was also limited. If he forcibly flew up, it would be difficult to control himself from crashing into the anti-air barrier in the air. What was unimaginable was that Long Houchen, who saw that he could not dodge, actually made a move that was almost impossible in battle. Crawl. Yes, at the moment when the red skeleton's shield was swung out, he actually crawled to the ground. The huge shield almost brushed past his back. The recoil of the shield against the ground caused Long Houchen to bounce up the moment he crawled. The ripples of light bloomed into thousands of rays of light, shrouding the red skeleton that had temporarily lost the protection of the shield. It was the demon-slaying flash. It could be said that Long Houchen's response could be described as wonderful. With the improvement of his external spiritual power by the dragon crystal, his flexibility was greatly enhanced, and it was enough to support himself to make many movements that he could not do before. The red skeleton did not panic because of Long Houchen's surprise attack. The huge bone blade instantly made a diagonal slashing action. It was actually the Shura slash. That's right, it used the Shura slash with one hand. Moreover, it even caught the momentum of the shield. After fighting with the red skeleton many times, the most profound thing that Long Houchen and his companions learned was that in battle, no action was superfluous. However, this time, the red skeleton clearly miscalculated. The thousands of cold rays suddenly condensed into a single point, directly hitting the blade of its bone blade. With a crisp clang, the huge body of the red skeleton was actually forced to take a step back. As a result, the shield in its left hand could not follow up with a follow-up attack. At this time, Long Houchen, who was passively defending, launched an all-out counterattack. With his left foot on the ground, Long Houchen's body suddenly shot forward with the power of the sword. The ripples of light in his hand almost instantly turned into an intense white. Immediately after, a white ray of light shot out from the sword, directly colliding with the red skeleton. The sword turned white naturally. It was a holy sword, and that white ray of light was the special attack of the holy sword state, Shenghua. Even the red skeleton did not dare to underestimate Shenghua's attack power. In desperation, it could only use its shield to protect itself. Amidst the loud bang, Shenghua's powerful attack made it take another step back. At this time, Long Houchen was already in front of it. The glorious holy shield had already been put away. At this time, Long Houchen only had the ripples of light shining with the radiance of the holy sword in his hands. Shura slash. In an instant, Long Houchen seemed to have entered a special state, exuding an extremely sharp sword intent. The simple Shura slash was used by him, but it felt like he had become one with the sword. One could clearly see that with his body as the center, a circle of white light with a diameter of 5 meters instantly contracted inward. Because Long Houchen's combo was too fast, the red skeleton could not attack him in time. It could only continue to defend with its shield. At the same time, it tilted its body slightly and used the shield to receive the attack from the side in an attempt to counterattack. However, it underestimated the power of Long Houchen's sword. The essence, energy, and spirit that were raised to the extreme in an instant made Long Houchen's sword full of an invincible spirit. Sword intent was what Long Houchen had gradually comprehended from the aria of the Goddess of Light. The reason why he did not use the divine sword was that he did not want to destroy the red skeleton's body. Boom! The shield shattered, and the red skeleton was actually sent flying by this sword. Moreover, because its body was facing Long Houchen diagonally, it also made a half-turn in the air when it was sent flying. The 4 wings spread out behind Long Houchen finally flapped at this moment, and a lightning-like golden light flashed in the air. He kicked the red skeleton's waist, and at the same time, the ripple of time cut off the red skeleton's right hand that was holding the bone knife. The moment these 2 movements were completed, Long Houchen in the air half-turned his elbow and hit the red skeleton's throat with the tip of his right elbow. This series of attacks was completed almost instantaneously. In the next moment, 1 person and 1 skeleton had suddenly separated. The red skeleton was thrown 30 feet away and smashed on the ground. Its right hand that was holding the bone knife had also been separated from its body and fell to the ground. Looking at this extremely exciting battle, the eyes of the General Class Monster Hunt 64 members all showed eagerness. They had won. After nearly a year, they had finally defeated this powerful red skeleton. Moreover, in a one-on-one situation, Long Houchen did not let Yiting and Haoyue assist him in the battle. This was respect for the strong. Woo! The red skeleton seemed to let out a groan as it used its left hand to support its body and slowly climbed up from the ground. Long Houchen once again released the glorious sacred shield from the eternal melody in front of him, ready to continue the battle. However, the red skeleton did not attack again. It stared at Long Houchen for a full 10 seconds, and then it slowly nodded to him. Then, it actually knelt on one knee and made a gesture of worship to Long Houchen. This is? Long Houchen looked at it in surprise. Senior, you don't have to do this. Master, Holy Guard number 12 reporting to you. A deep and vicissitude voice came from the mouth of the red skeleton. In any world outside the Tower of Eternity, any creature that wants to hurt you must step over my broken bones. As soon as the voice fell, the huge body of the red skeleton suddenly turned into a red light and flew towards Long Houchen. In the air, its body became smaller and smaller. When it arrived in front of Long Houchen, it had already turned into a small cluster of red flames. In the next moment, it disappeared into the eternal melody. Long Houchen only felt a slight warmth in his chest. When he opened his lapel and looked down, he could clearly see that on the white skull gem of the eternal melody that was emitting a golden light, there was a small cluster of red flames jumping slightly. Holy Guard number 12? Looking at the ground where the broken hand, bone knife, and shield fragments had disappeared without a trace, Long Houchen could not help but feel a little sluggish. Boss, what's going on? Is it a skill or spiritual power enhancement? Sima Xian asked excitedly. They also saw the red light, but did not hear Holy Guard number 12's voice, so they all thought it was the same as before. Long Houchen shook his head and smiled bitterly. I'm afraid I'm going to be forced to become a necromancer. He repeated Holy Guard number 12's words and said, If I'm not wrong, I should have the ability to summon the red skeleton as a guard. Wait a moment, I'll try. As he spoke, Long Houchen slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, a red light flashed, and the tall red skeleton, Holy Guard number 12, appeared in front of Long Houchen. Its broken arm and broken shield had completely recovered, and a blazing, wild aura slowly bloomed. Long Houchen opened his eyes. He realized that his soul seemed to be connected to this red skeleton. It could completely listen to his orders and fight. Moreover, it had a certain degree of self-awareness, which was the battle instinct that Long Houchen and the others had seen before. Everyone looked at each other. No one knew if this was a good thing or a bad thing. They all knew about the disasters that necromancers had brought to the continent. Long Houchen was a knight with the Son of Light constitution. If he really became a necromancer, it would be too ridiculous, and the Temple League would definitely not accept it. However, this Holy Guard number 12 had already entered Long Houchen's eternal melody. How could they chase it out? Long Houchen could not completely control his eternal melody. Long Houchen. Kyer held Long Houchen's hand. Actually, I think you're thinking too much. There was nothing in this world that was completely good or evil. If a necromancer can be a light mage, what else is impossible? You have this power, but you don't have to use it. Moreover, this red skeleton with the soul of a strong person doesn't have any aura of death. You'll only summon it to deal with the demons. If you use it to slay the demons, why would you have any psychological burden? Hanyu nodded and said, Vice Leader is right. Although this Tower of Eternity was left behind by the necromancer Electrolux, it doesn't have any hostility towards us. However, it doesn't have any enmity towards you and us. Instead, with its help, our strength continues to increase. As long as our hearts don't waver, the views of the secular world don't matter. What's more, we can completely conceal its existence. Sima Xian said, yes. More than 70% of the monster hunters end up in the territory of the demons. Who knows, we might die there one day. Boss, don't think too much. If it's accepted, then so be it. Come, let's continue forward and see what else is on this first floor. With the support of his companions, Long Houchen's face relaxed a little. In fact, after so long, he had thought it through, but he didn't want to cause disharmony in the team because of this matter. He underestimated the trust his companions had in him. No one questioned him. His spiritual power was connected to the eternal melody. With a slight thought from Long Houchen, the 12th Holy Guard had already turned into a red light and hid inside, as if it was nourished by the eternal melody. Maintain the formation and continue forward, Long Houchen shouted. With glorious holy shield and light ripple in hand, he took the lead. Light Ripple was a radiance-grade heavy sword with a very powerful skill. When it attacked, it would bring along a spiritual ripple that looked like a shadow, acting as a secondary attack. Its power was about 1/3 of a direct attack. In other words, when Long Houchen used the holy sword to attack, the secondary attack's power would be 1/3 of a holy sword's. This was also the main reason why the 12th Holy Guard couldn't withstand Long Houchen's attack at all. Of course, Long Houchen also understood that if the 12th Holy Guard had a set of equipment of the same level as him, it wouldn't be so easy to defeat him. After all, in terms of combat skills, Long Houchen had learned from him. This time, they sneaked for a full 20 meters before the Tower of Eternity reacted. Moreover, it seemed that they were getting closer to the end of the first floor. They could vaguely see a tall statue at the innermost part of the first floor. A crystal blue light descended from the sky. In the blue light, a skeleton that looked no different from the 12th Holy Guard slowly rose from the ground. The icy blue halo seemed to be instantly injected into its body. However, its body didn't expand like the 12th Holy Guard. Instead, it maintained a height of about 1.8 meters. However, the skeleton's bones had completely turned dark blue. 2 blue soul fires pulsed violently in its eye socket. In its right hand, a long-handled staff quietly appeared. It's a magic skeleton. Everyone be careful. Long Houchen shouted. At the same time, his body charged towards the blue skeleton like an arrow. He raised his speed to the maximum in an instant. He had a hunch that this should be the last stage of the first floor of the Tower of Eternity. After passing this stage, everything in the first floor of the Tower of Eternity would be presented to them. Blazing golden flames instantly rose around Long Houchen's body, illuminating the Tower of Eternity. He didn't just want to fight against the opponent that was obviously of the ice element. At the same time, he wanted to illuminate the surroundings for his companions so that they could deal with the blue skeleton's attack. There was a fundamental difference between the blue skeleton and the red skeleton in the 6th floor. When its soul fire was ignited, it didn't make any sound. Instead, it seemed extremely calm. In the face of Long Houchen's charge, its body slid backward as if it was stuck to ice. At the same time, the staff in its hand gently pointed forward. A thick icy mist had already covered the sky and covered the earth as it headed towards Long Houchen. Hee, it's time for me to show my power. Lin Xian's excited voice sounded. A layer of blue flame suddenly appeared in front of Long Houchen as if it was emitted by him. Chapter 128. When the icy mist from the blue skeletal staff landed on Long Houchen, he felt a chill run through his body. The flames of the sun that he released were being completely suppressed, and his movements were clearly slowed down. A chill that came from the bottom of his heart instantly spread throughout his body, as if his soul had become sluggish because of the icy mist. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. Lin Xian's flaming heart had already blocked in front of him. When the icy mist and the flaming heart's flaming heart came into contact, a strange popping sound was heard. The flaming heart's flaming heart continued to weaken, and the icy mist quickly melted away. Without a doubt, the icy mist released by the skeleton was not an ordinary icy mist, but Lin Xian's flaming heart's flaming heart was not an ordinary flame either. When the two offset each other, Lin Xian's flaming heart's flaming heart had the upper hand. Of course, this was also because Long Houchen's flames of the sun had already weakened the skeleton's offensive. The soul fire in the blue skeleton's eye sockets flickered slightly. The staff in its hand transformed into a mysterious trajectory in the air. It was chanting in a low voice, but Long Houchen couldn't make out what it was. However, a sparkling blue ice flower floated out of the staff. The speed of this ice flower didn't seem to be very fast, but Long Houchen only felt that the scenery in front of him suddenly became illusory. Then, his surroundings turned ice blue. From where the others were standing, Long Houchen's body paused for a moment, and then his whole body was enveloped by a huge ice flower. What a powerful magic! At this time, the General Tier Monster Hunt 64 members naturally would not wait any longer, and launched an all-out attack on the blue skeleton. Lin Xian's flaming heart's flaming heart fell on the huge ice flower, trying to melt it. Kair, Wang Yuan, Sima Xian, and Han Yu rushed towards the blue skeleton at the same time. Their movements were very coordinated. The four of them split up and rushed forward. Although it couldn't be said that they came from 4 different directions, they tried to put as much distance as possible so that the blue skeleton couldn't concentrate its attack. Chen Inger was already sitting on the ground. She held her crystal ball with both hands and silently chanted an incantation. On her chest, 2 strange rays of light, one gold and one silver, quietly appeared. They were like 2 balls of fire that revolved around her crystal ball. With each revolution, the spiritual power around Chen Inger's body would increase a little. In the middle of her eyebrows, a thin white line quietly appeared, faintly emitting white light. In the face of everyone's all-out attack, the blue skeleton didn't retreat. Instead, it suddenly slammed the staff in its hand on the ground. Boom! Amidst the violent explosion, the huge ice flower that froze Long Houchen suddenly exploded. The tyrannical explosive force scattered countless pieces of ice in all directions. Not only did these pieces of ice cover the entire layer of the tunnel, but they also set off a large wave of air. Even with everyone's cultivation, their forward momentum was abruptly halted. Kair's dark gold dagger transformed into countless light spots in the air. Every stab of the dagger would definitely break a ball of ice, but her eyes were looking in Long Houchen's direction. Not only her, but Wang Yuanyuan, Sima Xian, and Han Yu also did the same. The power of this ice flower explosion was so strong, would it even affect Long Houchen? Long Houchen was fine. At least on the surface, he still looked intact. However, the golden red flames that rose on his body and the flaming heart that Lin Xian had added to his body had been completely extinguished. His face was also a little pale, and there was a clear layer of frost on his body. Thick cold air densely covered the tunnel. Everyone could clearly feel their bodies stiffen. It should be known that after soaking in the dragon crystal medicinal liquid, their external spiritual power had greatly increased. Even if they couldn't completely absorb the medicinal effect, their external spiritual power had at least broken through 3,000 points. Even so, they felt their hands and feet stiffen. 7th grade. Without a doubt, this blue skeleton's cultivation was at the 7th grade. Moreover, its control of magic was like the red skeleton's ancient martial art. It could be described as perfect. A loud and clear phoenix cry rang out at this moment. The blazing flaming heart instantly rose, the scorching heat quickly dissolving the cold in the air. At the same time, the blue flame phoenix had already soared into the sky, passing everyone and heading straight for the blue skeleton. Lin Xian no longer cared about the spiritual stove's backlash. This blue skeleton was so strong that all of his companions had been slowed down. If he allowed it to continue attacking, it would be difficult for them to pass this stage. The 7 general grade Monster Hunt 64 members had already reached a tacit understanding. Han Yu suddenly raised the golden red legendary heavy sword in his hand. With a loud shout, a thick golden red color instantly dyed his whole body. It wasn't flames, but a pure color change. Even his eyes were dyed golden red. The stiffness of his body was instantly lifted, and he dragged a golden red shadow as he rushed straight for the blue skeleton. Sima Xian's body moved horizontally, and he was already in front of Long Houchen. His vigorous light pill had finally been recast a month ago, and he was holding it in his hand at this moment. Compared to before, the volume of the vigorous light pill hadn't changed much, but it had become dark gold, and there was a faint fierce aura constantly spreading. The original glorious light pill had been successfully upgraded to the legendary level after recasting. Moreover, if Sima Xian's external spiritual power hadn't been enhanced by the dragon crystal, he wouldn't have been able to use this terrifying equipment at all. In a flash of silver light, Wang Yuanyuan disappeared into thin air, and Kai also disappeared in the air in an instant. 4 people attacked, and 1 person protected Long Houchen. This was true tacit understanding. The blue skeleton was no longer calm as it faced the blue flame phoenix. Its chanting had clearly become hurried. It pointed the staff in its hand towards the ground. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! 3 ear-piercing buzzing sounds echoed as 3 huge ice crystals suddenly drilled out of the ground. They crisscrossed as they flew towards the blue flame phoenix. At the same time, a layer of ice blue light instantly spread from the blue skeleton's body, forming a layer of transparent blue light shield. Boom! The 3 thick ice crystals shattered at the same time, and the cold air that had previously filled the tunnel also disappeared in an instant. The attack power of Lin Xian's blue phoenix was indeed terrifying, and the strength of the heart's flame was obviously stronger than the blue skeleton's ice. However, the main difference between the two was the spiritual power. In the end, the blue phoenix couldn't continue forward, and with a low phoenix cry, it turned around and flew towards Lin Xian. In a flash of silver light, the first to attack was Wang Yuanyuan. The divine soul shield was like a mountain-splitting axe, and with the help of the spiritual stove, Wang Yuanyuan's attack arrived almost instantaneously, fiercely striking the blue skeleton's light shield. In the end, 2 pieces of empty silver crystals were refined from the auction, and Wang Yuanyuan could mount them. However, the current her could only attach 1 piece, otherwise it would exceed the range of her use. Even so, after adding the empty silver crystal, the Divine Soul Shield was directly upgraded to the legendary level. As the shield slashed out, a gigantic and terrifying silver figure flashed behind Wang Yuanyuan's back. In the midst of a violent roar, the blue shield shattered. However, the blue skeleton was also amazing. In such a disadvantageous situation, it suddenly lowered its body, as if it was skating on ice, and used the shield to cushion its attack to avoid Wang Yuanyuan's axe attack. At the same time, a circle of pure white ice suddenly spread, and forcefully pushed Wang Yuanyuan away. At this time, Han Yu had also arrived. His whole body was golden red, and he seemed to have entered a special state. The reddish-gold heavy sword in his hand slashed out, and like a golden-red hurricane, it swept towards the blue skeleton. Squeak! A sharp sound came from the blue skeleton's mouth, and an ice wall instantly blocked in front of Han Yu. However, in the next moment, the ice wall was smashed into pieces by Han Yu's golden-red greatsword. A circle of white ice appeared under Han Yu's feet, and in an instant it exploded, and a tyrannical cold air swept over his body. However, Han Yu, who was covered in reddish-gold color, seemed to have entered a state of invincibility. He actually ignored the cold air's corrosion on his body, and the heavy sword still slashed towards the blue skeleton. The blue skeleton was finally at its wit's end, and the soul fire in its eye sockets fluctuated violently. It raised the staff in its hand to block, and at the same time, its body was instantly covered with a layer of thick ice armor. Although the blue skeleton had powerful magic abilities, it did not have the powerful close combat strength of the red skeleton. Even with the ice armor's defense, it was still sent flying by Han Yu's sword, and even its staff was split into 2. What was more terrifying was that the red light on Han Yu's heavy sword had a special kind of stickiness, and the blue skeleton actually stopped for a moment the moment it was sent flying. Next, it was time for Han Yu to perform. The blood-red heavy sword fluttered up and down, and with each slash, the red skeleton's body was covered with a layer of terrifying red. The ice armor on its body only withstood 3 attacks before it was shattered. Han Yu's last slash directly hit the blue skeleton's shoulder, and its body was split in half. Kair, who was hiding in the dark, did not make a move. Since Han Yu had already finished killing the blue skeleton, there was naturally no need for her to make a move. Long Haochen also gradually recovered from the previous coldness, but his face was still a little pale. The blue skeleton's attack on his body was quite terrifying. Fortunately, he had the holy fire brought by Yiting, and he also had the support of the fire of the sun and the flame of the heart, as well as the radiant holy armor's holy light protection, which offset most of the explosive force. Even so, it took Long Haochen nearly 20 seconds to completely expel the chill. The entire battle did not last long, but it was not easy to defeat this blue skeleton. One must know that in the real world, Long Haochen could single-handedly fight a powerhouse of the 7th step. But just now, they had gathered the strength of almost everyone just to defeat this blue skeleton. If it was not for Lin Xion's blue flame phoenix greatly weakening the blue skeleton's strength, it would have been even more difficult for them to win this battle. On the other side, Chen Inger, who was chanting an incantation, had already stopped. In that instant just now, there were actually 3 living soul gates quietly opening behind her. However, the incantation was interrupted, and the 3 living soul gates also disappeared. This was the powerful effect of the stacking time spiritual stove, which was formed by the combination of the substitute spiritual stove and the spiritual stove of time. Of course, she could only use this ability once a day. Fortunately, there was not too strong of a backlash. 3 times the summoning to a summoner, This was almost a heaven-defying ability. It was just that the current Shen Inger could not fully display its power due to her own body. The blue skeleton's broken body gradually emitted a layer of blue light, and a slightly sharp voice echoed in the air. Holy Guard number 1 reporting to Master. Its body that had split into two on the ground suddenly floated up, and turned into two streams of light that went straight towards Long Houchen. Just like the red skeleton from before, it also merged into the Eternal Melody in Long Houchen's chest. The Eternal Melody's gem was in the shape of a white skull. At this moment, on the surface of the skull, apart from the red flames, there was also a cluster of blue flames. It was also at this moment that suddenly, the Tower of Eternity seemed to tremble slightly. Long Houchen and the others could clearly feel the earth trembling. Everyone hurriedly gathered together, vigilantly watching the changes in their surroundings. A soft golden light rippled out from the Eternal Melody in Long Houchen's chest. Wherever the golden light passed, everything that was originally illusory and hazy in the air was magically dispersed. The soft golden light rippled in the air, and everything became clear. Right in front of Long Houchen and the others, a huge statue appeared in front of them. Although it was just a statue, when the seven of them looked at it, they felt a kind of epic vastness and endless majesty. The statue was about 10 meters tall, and it stood there quietly. It was wearing a gorgeous black robe that was vivid and lifelike. On the black robe, there were golden runes shining. Outside the robe was a large white cloak, which formed a sharp contrast with the black robe inside. The hood of the cloak was placed on the head, making the statue's face look very dark, and it was impossible to see its true appearance. In its right hand was a magic staff that was 2 meters long, and the whole body of the staff was a mixture of 3 colors: black, white, and gold. These 3 colors entangled together. Black represented pure death, gold represented holy light, and white seemed to be related to the summoning power of the summoning magician. The 3 colors coiled up to form this magical staff. At the top of the staff was a huge crystal. This crystal was carved into the shape of a skull. It was completely white, and it looked like an enlarged version of the Eternal Melody pendant. Looking at this statue, everyone was shocked. Although it was just a statue, and although everyone knew that it was not a physical object, they were still shocked by the depth, wisdom, majesty, and vastness that the statue emitted. Although Long Houchen had always been immature, and he was the successor of the holy law of necromancy, Necromancer Calamity Electrolux, he still gave this statue a knight's salute. He did not like necromancers, but he could not help but admire this powerhouse from 10,000 years ago. Just by looking at the Tower of Eternity, one could see how terrifying it was back then. It should be a tyrannical existence on the same level as the Demon Emperor. Congratulations, my child, you have passed the first test. Do you like the gift I left for you? The 12 holy guards were my 12 guardians back then, and each of them was a supreme being. Unfortunately, human life is limited, and in the end, I could only let them continue to exist in the form of the undead. This is also one of the most precious resources I have left for you. What you faced before was their power after their strength was suppressed. As you continue to move forward, with each test you pass, the power of the holy guards will also recover a portion. Continue forward, my child. One day, you will restore the glory of my 12 holy guards. A pure white beam of light shone from the skull gem at the top of the staff, turning into a white beam of light that appeared in front of everyone. The beam of light was about 3 meters in diameter, and it emitted a faint spatial fluctuation. Lin Xian muttered, "This holy law of necromancer is too stingy. We have already passed the first test, but he did not give us any more rewards." Han Yu chuckled and said, "What other rewards do you want?" Without the first test of the Tower of Eternity, would our spiritual energy have increased so quickly? I am afraid we are still far from reaching the 6th stage. What's more, we have obtained skills, experience, and 2 holy guards. Didn't the holy law of necromancers say that the holy guards can still recover their power? Think about it, if the red and blue skeletons we encountered were to increase their spiritual energy and be able to use more powerful skills, how terrifying would that be? What's more, this is only the first floor of the Tower of Eternity. For us, being able to come here is more fortunate than having a divine artifact. After all, with our current cultivation, we are still unable to control a divine artifact, but the Tower of Eternity can continue to temper us and improve our overall strength. Everyone had a feeling of deep agreement with what Han Yu said, and they nodded in unison. Long Houchen said, "If we walk into this beam of light, we should be able to enter the second floor. Do you want to continue to try?" Wang Yuanyuan said, "Leader, you decide. However, I don't think Ying Er should go. She has just consumed all her spiritual energy, and it is not good for her to take the risk." Long Houchen thought about it and said, "How about this, you all stay here, I will go and explore the way first. With Hao Yue here, no matter what happens I can retreat in time." Hao Yue was lying lazily 100 meters behind them at this time. Long Houchen did not let it participate in the previous battle. The longer the experience in the Tower of Eternity, the more Long Houchen cherished everything here. If it were not for the fact that their next action was likely to face more difficult dangers, he would not even choose to gather everyone here to defeat the blue skeleton, thus obtaining the final test of the first floor. With one step, Long Houchen stepped into the white holy light. Under the holy light, he was surprised to find that the spiritual energy that he had consumed before was recovering at an accelerated rate. The white light flashed, and the next moment, he had appeared in another place. As soon as he arrived at the second floor of the Tower of Eternity, Long Houchen was shocked. The reason was simple: he did not feel his feet on the ground here. In front of him was a white misty scene. There was still a row of pillars extending forward on both sides, but under his feet, it was not an entity, but an illusory cloud. At this time, he was in the white light. As long as he stepped out of the white light, he would officially enter the second floor of the Tower of Eternity. Tentatively, he took a step out and stepped into the white cloud. In the next moment, Long Houchen could not help but whisper, because he clearly felt that his body was falling in an instant. A strong sense of weightlessness suddenly hit him. The white light flashed, and the surrounding scenery dimmed again. The feeling of being on the ground was instantly restored, but Long Houchen was surprised to find that he had appeared in front of his companions. He had actually returned to the hall on the first floor of the Tower of Eternity. "What is going on?" Long Houchen was slightly startled. "Boss, is it dangerous to be unfamiliar? Why are you back so soon?" Sima Xian asked curiously. Long Houchen shook his head gently and stepped into the white light again. The white light flashed, and in the next moment, he returned to the second floor of the Tower of Eternity. He had faintly understood that in this second floor, he was afraid that he had to continue to use the ability to fly. If the first floor was forbidden to fly, then this second floor was probably forbidden to land. This time, he learned his lesson and spread the 4 wings behind him to step out of the range of the white light. Sure enough, with the flying ability of the spiritual wings, he did not fall this time. Long Houchen didn't rush to fly forward. Instead, he silently sensed his surroundings. To his surprise, he discovered that after arriving at the second level, the aura of death had weakened significantly. Instead, the aura of light had become much denser. However, even with his perception, he could only explore less than 100 meters away. It seemed that there was a powerful soul seal here. Without a doubt, if he wanted to pass the second floor, he still had to go forward along the 2 sides of the pillars and accept the test of the second floor of the Tower of Eternity. Vaguely, Long Houchen had already understood the situation of this second floor, and roughly knew what the second floor was testing. The 4 wings behind him lightly spread, and with a flash of golden light, Long Houchen summoned Yiting. After Yiting and the saint's spiritual stove fused and evolved, she was no longer afraid of the pressure in the Tower of Eternity. Her 6 wings spread out and lightly floated behind Long Houchen. You don't need to go forward, you only need to support me from behind. Long Houchen instructed Yiting, and then slowly floated forward. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, until he floated about 10 meters or so. Suddenly the white clouds below suddenly surged. Then, one after another, 6 figures appeared in 6 directions of Long Houchen, and then pounced towards him like lightning. They were still skeletons, but they had become relatively petite skeletons with bone wings on their back. Their bone wings were connected by transparent diaphragms, and their speed was surprisingly fast. As soon as they appeared, they were like 6 white lights stabbing towards Long Houchen. Long Houchen had always maintained the highest level of vigilance, and was not the slightest bit flustered in the face of the sudden attack. His left hand that was holding the shield moved in a flash, and a golden light curtain suddenly enveloped him. Guardian Knights rank 6 skill, Shield Wall. This skill, Shield Wall, could be used to defend oneself from all directions, and could also be used to defend the front in a large area. Although it could not be used in conjunction with Divine Block, its defensive ability was also extremely strong. In the ear-piercing sound of metal exploding, the 6 white figures rushed forward quickly, and flew back just as quickly. Moreover, when they retreated, they were extremely rhythmic, as if they were one. So much so that the heavy sword that Long Houchen swept out missed. Long Houchen's originally smooth and flowing attacks on the ground were obviously restricted in the air. However, at this moment, his heart was very excited, because he was very clear that he and his companions lacked the experience and training of aerial combat. Without a doubt, the Tower of Eternity had given them this opportunity. Of course, it was true that Long Houchen's battle prowess in the air was restricted, but he would not be stumped by this first hurdle. 3 white lights simultaneously shot out from Yiting's body, and as if they had grown eyes, they fell on the 3 white skeletons. Immediately after, a powerful suction force pulled them towards Long Houchen's direction. Speaking of which, it was strange. Although the power of this saint's spiritual stove was being used by Yiting, it was no different from when Long Houchen himself used it. After the enemy was pulled, they were all targeted at Long Houchen. Being pulled by the saint's spiritual stove, these white skeletons naturally lost their greatest advantage of agility and speed. Facing the powerful attack of Ripple of Light, in front of Long Houchen, they could only persist for less than 5 seconds before turning into fragments. The other 3 flying skeletons were also chopped into pieces by Long Houchen in the same way. This first hurdle could be considered passed. However, what made Long Houchen somewhat regretful was that killing these skeletons did not bring him that kind of high-purity spiritual power, nor did they have any skills. It seemed that, at this point, it had already become a simple test. Regarding this, Long Houchen did not have any complaint. If only 10 points of pure spiritual power were given to him, for the current him, it would not have much effect. After his cultivation rose to the 6th step, Long Houchen opened his spiritual aperture. Afterwards, the awakening of the god's favored physique, Yiting's evolution, and the spiritual stove synthesis, all of these made his overall strength increase, and at the same time, also increased his ability to absorb the light element. As a god's favored physique, Long Houchen could fully deserve to say that he was the person with the highest affinity to the light element in this world. After 4 months of seclusion, his internal spiritual power had increased by more than 1,000 points. Now, his internal spiritual power cultivation had already brazenly broken through 8,500 points, unceasingly approaching the 7th step. Apart from him, although his companion's internal spiritual power also increased at a good rate, the gap between them was getting bigger and bigger. Even Kai was the same. After all, her god's favored physique had not yet awakened. After passing the 1st level, Long Houchen did not continue forward. Instead, he returned to the 1st level and explained his experience and judgment in detail. As everyone broke through the 6th step and obtained spiritual wings, It was urgent to improve their aerial combat ability. With such a rare and good platform, they naturally could not let go of it. Every time their strength increased, their ability to carry out missions would also increase. After careful consideration, Long Houchen immediately made a decision. In the following exploration of the second level, apart from Chen Inger, everyone would take the aerial combat test with their individual ability. Moreover, they were not allowed to use the ability of the spiritual stove, nor were they allowed to use the ability of the mount. As for Chen Inger, of course, she would be training her natal summoned beast, Madul Piglet. This was a huge hall filled with darkness. It was at least 1,000 square meters in size and more than 10 meters in height. The surrounding walls were octagonal. The hall was dim, but at each of the 8 corners, there was a cluster of purple flames rising, bringing some light and extremely dense dark aura to this mysterious hall. In the middle of this dark hall stood a man. A head of black hair draped over his back, but his eyes blossomed with a blood-red luster. Advance, forward punch. Terrifying dark spiritual power fluctuations were instantly released like a geyser. Every punch, kick, and even the simplest of movements would bring about a terrifying sound of air exploding. It was unknown what material this hall was made of, but no matter how he wreaked havoc in it, the hall itself did not budge. In the process of the spiritual power explosions he blasted out, the purple light was faintly discernible, and one could barely make out his appearance. His handsome face was filled with a grave expression, and his upper body was bare. Every time he launched an attack, a layer of scale-like dark purple demonic patterns would surge out of his body. The blood-red light in his eyes would also become more intense. Just as his aura reached its peak, suddenly, a figure silently appeared behind him. This figure was tall and slender, and his body was shrouded in a long black robe. The long black hair fell from the sides of his face, and his face could not be seen clearly. As if sensing the sudden threat behind him, the bare-chested man suddenly turned around and blasted a punch at the figure that suddenly appeared behind him. This punch condensed his powerful combat power at the peak of his realm, and the terrifying power was instantly raised to the extreme. The entire center of the dark hall lit up because of his punch, and all the spiritual power that he had blasted out earlier seemed to have condensed in this circle. The distortion caused by the compression of space seemed to be able to tear the hall apart at any time. However, the figure that suddenly appeared did not move. In the face of such a terrifying attack, he only raised his hand slightly. A fair and slender finger reached out and touched the fist that seemed to be dominating the world. Puff! Time seemed to have frozen at this moment, and there was no explosion. The slender figure did not even emit any spiritual power fluctuations. However, in the next instant, the powerful bare-chested man was sent flying like a cannonball fired from a magic cannon. With a loud bang, he crashed into the wall in the distance, and a hazy purple luster spread out from his body. Bada! The body that was pressed against the wall fell back to the ground. The slender figure placed his hands behind his back, and a gentle voice sounded. Being too rigid makes it easy to break. If you only know how to be tough and not soft, you will never reach the realm of heaven-defying. This voice was this gentle voice. If someone familiar with him heard it, there would only be 2 results. They would either crawl in front of him or be horrified. The man who fell to the ground slowly got up, but he did not stand up. Instead, he knelt there and lowered his head respectfully. "Father, your injuries are almost healed, so why don't you leave here? Are you not going to hold the marriage that you fought so hard for?" The slender figure raised his head slightly, letting his long hair flutter a little, and revealed his extremely handsome face. Feng Xiu, Demon Emperor Feng Xiu. As for the person kneeling under the wall with blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, wasn't that the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan's Crown Prince A Bao, who had been severely injured after fighting with Long Houchen in the illusory paradise? Lowering his head, A Bao said faintly, "I don't have the face to marry Yu Yi." Demon Emperor Feng Xiu calmly said, "You can't even endure such a small setback?" Original literature, popular novels, online reading, Yexi, CHM, TXT, and other ebook download platforms. Horu provides information about youth fantasy, urban romance, horror and paranormal for everyone who loves to read and write. Martial arts, xianxia, history, military, science fiction, sports, love games, short essays, scripts and doujinshi reading and creative services, leading the vast number of readers to a fashionable reading life. Abao raised his head and looked at his father. But this isn't just a setback. This time, the heirs of several demon gods fell in the illusory paradise, and our final mission also fell short of success. Although Father has absolute authority, the storm this time is too big. Even Huang Shuao was blackmailed of 10 dragon crystals. The responsibility is all on me. I know how much pressure Father has endured to protect me. I am a sinner of my clan. I have failed to live up to your expectations. Demon Emperor waved his hand and said, "Okay, no need to say this. As a superior, you can't care about temporary gains and losses. Thinking too much will often cause you to fall into more trouble. How can you achieve great things if your mind is not clear? In human terms, you can't be too conflicted. You didn't lose unjustly this time, and it was mainly because of luck. You didn't do anything wrong during the whole process. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to do better. It's just that you met a god's favored that this plane doesn't meet in 10,000 years, and it happened at the moment when he triggered the awakening. That sword of his, even if you let him try 100 or 1,000 times, he wouldn't be able to use it again. Father, I can't accept this. I can't accept losing to a weak human. What bullsh**. T gods favored, Abao's eyes were bloodshot. In front of others, he was always so calm, only in front of Demon Emperor did he reveal some of his true nature. Shut up. Feng Xiu's voice became cold for the first time. Even as the heir of Demon Emperor, when Abao sensed his father's anger, he couldn't help but immediately kneel on the ground, not daring to say another word. Demon Emperor said coldly, "If you have this kind of attitude, then the next time you meet him, you will still lose to him, maybe even more miserably. I can't save you every time. Do you know, this time when I tore open space to rescue you, that annoying demon god's fallen monster hunters took the opportunity to kill 3 of my clansmen? They're warning me. They are all real lunatics, and there is more than one like the demon gods fallen. Humans are becoming more and more difficult to deal with. As my heir, if you can't face the strength of humans, then you won't have the right to inherit my throne in the future. I know you are very unconvinced, thinking that human is much weaker than you. But have you really calmed down and carefully analyzed the reason for your defeat? Is there any other reason other than that person being a favorite of God who unleashed a powerful attack in the face of danger?" Abao raised his head, looking at his father, because he obtained the support of Fantasy Paradise. His attributes are compatible with Fantasy Paradise. Later on, he joined forces with the representative of Nature Goddess to fight against us. Demon Emperor said calmly, "Then how can he do this?" Abao was stunned but couldn't answer. Demon Emperor said in a low voice, "Because of wisdom. We demons are often too arrogant because of our strength, so you lost. It's good that you postponed the wedding. Now you should know what you have to do, right?" "Yes." Chapter 129. What? The Holy Knight, Han Q, slammed the table and stood up. His face was filled with shock. In front of him stood a tall knight, standing respectfully with his hands by his side. Han Q's breathing became a bit uneven. These little brats, what are they trying to do? I thought they were mature enough to be able to stay calm for so long. But they, on the other hand, shocked the world with a single brilliant feat. How long have they been gone? The tall knight said, "About an hour." Han Q said, "Go, chase them back. Tell them I ordered them to come back." The tall knight said with some difficulty, "Lord Holy Knight, that's not good. That's against the rules. The monster hunters are an independent organization. Even the Alliance can't command them as they please. Moreover, everything they've done is within the rules. Han Q said angrily, "What kind of *T rules are these? If something happens to these little brats, the entire Alliance will explode. Hurry up and go." Yes. The tall knight didn't dare to disobey Han Q's orders a second time. He turned around and walked out. Just as he reached the door, Han Q suddenly said, "Come back." The knight was stunned. He stopped in his tracks and turned around to face Han Q. Han Q walked out from behind the table and paced back and forth in his spacious office. His eyebrows were almost knitted together. After pacing back and forth for more than 10 times, his eyebrows finally relaxed. He sighed and said to himself, "That brat and that girl are already over 16 years old. They were able to go into seclusion for so long, so they must have gained quite a bit. Young eagles will always be under the protection of their parent. They will never be able to soar above the 9 heavens. Let them have a try. Long Houchen, you stinking brat, you must come back alive." That's right, just now, the knight standing in front of him had brought shocking news. The long-dormant Commander Tier Monster Hunt 64 had suddenly appeared on the 3rd floor of the Monster Hunter's mission tower. It had accepted 16 killing missions in one go and immediately set off, leaving the Holy City and heading straight for the demons. There were 16 killing missions that could only be accepted by commander-level monster hunters. Even the simplest one was to kill a rank 7 demons and seize its magical crystal. Among the missions they accepted, there were even 3 that were targeted at the 8th stage of the demons. The most powerful one was the snake demon Andamari, who was ranked last among the 72 demon god demons. Even if it was the 72nd ranked demon god, it was still a demon god at the peak of the Type 8 realm. Furthermore, once he was within the protection of his demon god pillar, his strength would be equivalent to multiple Type 8 powerhouses. The mission to kill Andamari was also the most difficult one among all the commander tier missions. This mission was also shared by the King and Overlord monster hunters at the same time. After all, Andamari was not standing there alone waiting for you to kill him. He was also a demon god who commanded a large army of demons. Long Houchen and the rest actually accepted such a mission. It was simply courting death. After all, the peak of the Type 8 was a terrifying existence with a spiritual energy value of close to 100,000. Because the Monster Hunter's mission tower was in the Holy City, it would take a long journey to pick up the missions. Therefore, the Monster Hunters could accept a few more missions in one go. However, it was the first time that Long Houchen and the rest had accepted 16 killing missions in one go. After all missions had a time limit. If they could not complete it by the time limit, their merit points would be deducted. Of course, the increase in the number of missions accepted at one go also extended the time limit. The total time taken for Long Houchen and the rest to complete all the missions this time was as long as 2 years. However, with their current strength, would they be able to defeat the 72nd demon god, Andamari, in 2 years? Even Han Q, who was very confident in Long Houchen, felt that it was a fantasy. However, these little guys had already left. Would they really chase them back? That would be no different from a blow to these children. Thinking of the real situation in Dream Paradise that Long Houchen had reported to him, Han Q's tightened heart gradually relaxed. Yes, Han Q already knew what Long Houchen and the rest had gained in Dream Paradise. As for how Long Houchen had brought his companions in, he did not know. Long Houchen only said that it was a secret that could not be revealed. All of them had spiritual stoves, so they should have no problem protecting themselves. Moreover, Long Houchen was not old, but he was not reckless. Let them try it out. Moreover, that person would protect them. Yes, I have to tell him about this as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Han Q temporarily suppressed the worry in his heart. He let the tall knight leave first, and he hurried out of the office. At this time, The little guys that Lord Holy Night was worried about were sitting in a comfortable carriage, enjoying the scenery on both sides of the official road, which brought them a rare relaxation. The carriage was specially made for monster hunters. Long Houchen and the rest had enjoyed it once before, but that was only once. It was because it was a compulsory mission. This time, they were already general-level monster hunters, so they had the right to be assigned a carriage that belonged to their own team. Naturally, it was much more convenient for them to travel. At least they could get sufficient rest during the journey. At this time, none of the 7 general-level Monster Hunt 64 members were practicing. The curtains on both sides of the carriage were high, and with the added comfort of the levitation spell, the carriage did not feel the slightest bit bumpy. It was Long Houchen's order not to practice. They were about to embark on a long and arduous journey, and they had just been in seclusion for so long. Everyone needed to relax, and this period of relaxation was before they entered the demons. It had been a whole year since they left Dream Paradise, and everyone had grown up a year. The youngest, Long Houchen and Kair, had also celebrated their 16th birthday. Compared to a year ago, the current general-level Monster Hunt 64 members looked more heroic and reserved. They were less impetuous and more calm. As for the extent of their overall combat power, even they were not very clear. After all, they had not appeared on the battlefield with the demons for more than a year. Their first stop on this trip was still Xingshuan City, which they passed by when they completed the terror-howling cave. They also had to enter the Narik province of the demons from the southeast fortress, and then go deep into the territory of the demons. The carriage sped all the way, and after 10 days, they successfully arrived at Xingshuan City. Over the past year, there had been frequent battles, and various human fortresses had been strongly attacked by the demons. The most tragic battle was naturally the Battle of Southern Fortress, where the demons had almost destroyed the city. If not for the timely arrival of reinforcements, the consequences would have been unimaginable. On the contrary, the southeast fortress, where the warrior temple was located, was the most peaceful one. It was unknown whether it was because of the great shuffling of the Narik province. Although there were occasional disturbances, there had been no large-scale war. With such a big background, the atmosphere in Xingshuan City, which was the backyard of the southeast fortress, was particularly peaceful. Industry and commerce had been effectively improved, and the civilians lived and worked in peace. In fact, the ambition of humans could not be compared to that of the demons. As long as they could have a safe and stable life, they would be easily satisfied. Long Houchen and the others did not disturb the Xingshuan City Magistrate's office and the military. Instead, they quietly checked into a medium-sized hotel and arranged for 2 coachmen to rest for 2 days before returning to the Holy City. After all, it was impossible for them to return to the Holy City in a short period of time for this mission, so why should they wait here? After letting his companions return to their respective rooms to rest, Long Houchen took Kai-Er's small hand and walked out of the hotel. In order to not attract attention, the 2 of them put on a bamboo hat with a veil to cover their faces. After all, Kai-Er was not the only one with an amazing appearance. As they strolled on the streets of Xingshuan City, Long Houchen took Kai-Er's hand and chuckled. I suddenly remembered the time when we first met in the Holy City. The competition that should have been the most important has become a foil. Instead, sending you back every day is what I look forward to the most. I am very satisfied to be able to see you every day. Kai-Er giggled and said, "Why can't I only think of your silly look at that time?" Long Houchen did not mind and chuckled. "Who asked me to be your silly look? As long as you like it, it doesn't matter if I'm silly." Kai-Er's gaze softened, and she leaned slightly closer to Long Houchen. The 2 of them walked slowly in this warm atmosphere. Along the way, the 2 of them walked with ease until they stopped in front of a building. This 2-story building had 3 large words on it: Yu Yi Business Group. Entering the demons' territory directly required a great deal of risk. The demons' surveillance at the border was very strict. However, it was different to sneak into the demons' territory with the Yu Yi business group. The demons were the same as the Temple League. They were tight on the outside but loose on the inside. As long as they entered the interior and disguised themselves as the Moon Devils, it would not be difficult to carry out their mission. Moreover, if they could cooperate with Yu Yi, it would naturally be much more convenient for them to act. About 5 months ago, Long Haochen and Kair had secretly come to Xingshuan City to see Yu Yi, who had been waiting there bitterly. They had eased the time of her restriction. They had also agreed on a date for this operation. As soon as they entered the Yu Yi business group, an employee immediately greeted them. Long Haochen handed over a token the size of a baby's palm and asked him to find the person in charge. He and Kair waited in the hall of the Yu Yi business group. The business group seemed very busy, with people constantly coming in and out. This was only a facade of the Yu Yi business group. The goods were not mobilized here. Even so, it was still very busy. Long Haochen trusted Yu Yi more than before. The reason was naturally because of Yu Ye's performance in Dream Paradise. At that time, Yu Ye's cooperation had played a great role. At the same time, Long Haochen also saw her role in the team. While Long Haochen was thinking about the 16 missions he had taken on this time, he suddenly heard some messy footsteps outside. Then, a group of soldiers walked in from outside. This group of soldiers were all dressed in leather armor. The leader wore a low-ranking officer's chainmail. All of them held their heads high. It was obvious that they were not here to do good. "Where's your boss? Call him out." The leading officer held the saber at his waist with one hand and put the other hand on his waist. The 10 soldiers he brought quickly formed a line. They pointed their spears at the shop and blocked the entrance. Seeing these soldiers, a shop assistant immediately came forward. "Sir, what are you doing?" the shop assistant asked carefully. The officer snorted coldly. "Your Yu Yi business group is suspected of colluding with the demons. I'm here to bring your boss back for questioning." The shop assistant was stunned. Obviously, this was the first time he had encountered such a thing. "Sir, we are free merchants. We are protected by the Alliance." "But," the officer slapped him. "What do you mean by free merchants? Let me tell you, I'm a new patrol officer. I'm in charge of patrolling this street. It's said that your Yu Yi business group is the richest on this street. Why is it rich? Isn't it because you colluded with the demons?" Hearing the officer's words, Long Haochen pulled Kair to the side. He thought that the Yu Yi business group had committed a crime. As a member of the Temple League, he naturally wouldn't care about this kind of business. As long as it didn't affect the Yu Yi business group, bringing them into the territory of the demons, it would be fine. However, as he listened to the latter part, it obviously changed. "What do you mean by the Yu Yi business group is the richest?" Even if Long Haochen didn't know much about these official things, he could vaguely guess what these officers were here for. At this moment, a manager of the Yu Yi business group hurried over from behind. When he saw the officers blocking the entrance, he was also stunned. The shop assistant who passed the message pointed at Long Haochen and whispered something in his ear. The manager first bowed to Long Haochen and apologized. Then, he turned to the officer and smiled. "Sir, I'm the manager of the Yu Yi business group. May I know why Sir is blocking the entrance of our business group?" "We are legal merchants under the protection of the governor's office." The officer sneered. "What legal merchants? Aren't you doing business with the demons?" "Colluding with the demons, what kind of crime is that? Come with us." As he said that, he raised his hand to grab the manager's shoulder. The manager's smile didn't change, but his body swayed slightly, easily dodging the grab. He took a step back and said, "Sir, please conduct yourself with dignity. If this matter is brought up, it won't do you any good. I think I have a way to prove our innocence." As he said that, he took out a bag of money and handed it to the officer. Originally, the officer was about to lose his temper when the other party dodged his grab. However, when he saw the bag of money handed over by the manager, the cold expression on his face immediately melted like a spring breeze. He took the bag of money and opened it to take a look. His eyes immediately revealed a trace of satisfaction. You can count as a director. It's not easy for you independent merchants to do business with the demons. Be careful. All right, we're leaving. As he said that, he waved his hand and was about to leave with the soldiers. Wait a moment. A clear but somewhat indifferent voice rang out at this moment. The officer froze for a moment and turned to look in the direction of the voice. He saw one of the two people wearing bamboo hats walk out and casually take off his hat. What's the matter? The officer's voice became cold again. He looked at Long Houchen's handsome and extremely young appearance and immediately put on an official's prestige. Long Houchen said indifferently, "All of you stay here. Send someone to the governor's office and call the governor or the chief of military affairs of Star Search City to come." The officer's expression changed. "Kid, is there something wrong with your head?" As he said that, he raised the saber on his waist with his left hand. This saber had a scabbard. He raised the tip of the saber and smashed it towards Long Houchen's head with the scabbard. A glint flashed in Long Houchen's eyes and a biting cold murderous aura immediately exploded from his body. "You dare?" This angry shout was like a clap of thunder in the entire Yi Commerce Association. The officer was just a small character. How could he withstand Long Houchen's angry shout that was filled with spiritual power? His face turned pale and he immediately fell to the ground. The soldiers that he brought along also fell to the ground in a crooked manner. Long Houchen raised his right hand and a ray of golden light descended, enveloping an ordinary soldier. He then threw a ray of silver light into the soldier's bosom. "Go do as I said. Otherwise, you'll never be able to leave this place." Just one angry shout was enough to make these officers and soldiers lose their fighting strength. At this moment, there was only fear in their hearts, and they did not dare to resist at all. When the officer vaguely saw the appearance of the token, his face turned ashen and he mumbled to himself, unable to say a word. The soldier who was relieved by Long Houchen's recovery spell hugged the commander-level monster hunter's token that Long Houchen threw to him and ran away in a hurry. Long Houchen coldly said to the other soldiers, "Get lost and kneel to the side." These people were only frightened to the ground, but they did not lose their ability to move. Faced with Long Houchen's power, who would dare to resist? Especially that officer, he was like a defeated rooster. He did not dare to make a sound and was the first to crawl to the side and kneel. Even now, the anger on Long Houchen's face did not diminish. He clenched his fists tightly. If these soldiers had dared to resist just now, he might have directly attacked them. Ever since Long Houchen became a knight, almost all the enemies he faced were demons. The humans he came into contact with were mostly heroes, galloping on the battlefield and sweeping through the enemies. What was it for? It was to ensure that the common people lived in peace and contentment. However, when his soldiers were fighting with the demons on the battlefield, such vermin actually appeared behind their back. How could the kind-hearted Long Houchen not be angry? He was forcefully restraining his emotions, which was why he didn't directly kill the officer. Otherwise, as soon as he made a move, he would definitely take the officer's life. Looking at their cowardly appearance, then thinking of the Alliance soldiers who sacrificed their lives and shed their blood on the battlefield, Long Houchen felt his heart ache. He really wanted to kill all of these pieces of trash. Monster hunters did not only target the demons. In the Temple League, they also had a special responsibility, which was to supervise. Any rank of monster hunters had the ability to supervise any level of the Alliance. The higher the rank of the monster hunters, the greater the role of supervision. For example, if a legend rank monster hunters questioned the leader of the Alliance, they would immediately start impeachment proceedings. Monster hunters had risked their lives for the Alliance and achieved countless military achievements. They did not have the authority to directly command the army, but in terms of supervision, They were the most powerful in the alliance. As the commander-rank monster hunters, Long Houchen had the authority to invite Xingshuan City's consul or military chief over. He could even directly question these two managers of Xingshuan City. Once he raised a serious accusation, these two would probably have to undergo an in-depth investigation. It was very likely that their futures would be ruined. The manager of the Yu Yi merchant group had been standing quietly at the side ever since Long Houchen spoke, watching Long Houchen handle this matter. When Long Houchen shouted, he was also shocked. That killing intent was not something that just anyone could emit. Only powerhouses who had truly been on the battlefield and killed countless enemies could release such an iron-blooded aura. It was no wonder that the president had repeatedly asked them to cooperate with all their actions. As expected, he was not an ordinary person. Long Houchen turned to the manager and said in a deep voice, "Hello, I am Long Houchen. Does this kind of situation happen often?" The manager of the Yu Yi merchant group shook his head slightly and said, "It's very rare. This officer should have just started his job. His actions cannot be representative of ordinary soldiers." Hearing this, Long Houchen's expression relaxed a little. "Then why did you not question him just now?" The manager smiled indifferently and said, "Mr. Long, harmony breeds wealth. We are merchants. Citizens do not fight with officials." Long Houchen nodded silently. He knew that when it came to dealing with people, he was still just a 16-year-old youth. However, since he had encountered it today, he had to get involved to the end. This could also be considered a warning to the Xingshuan City officials. The soldiers were protecting the country at the front lines. If something happened to the rear because of these vermin, he would not be able to bear it. "Is Miss Yu Yi doing well?" Long Houchen asked in a low voice. The manager said respectfully, "Miss is doing well, but she is not here. Before she left, she told us that if Mr. Long needs anything, please let us know. We will do our best to cooperate. The newest merchant group will set off in 3 days. The goods are almost ready." Long Houchen nodded and said, "All right, we will go with your merchant group and enter the demon's territory." The manager nodded slightly and did not say anything else. He appeared very cautious and calm. Indeed, to be able to gain Yu Ye's trust, he must not be an ordinary person. Not long after, the sound of hurried horse hooves could be heard from outside. The sound stopped at the entrance of the merchant group. 2 middle-aged men hurriedly strode in. One of them was wearing a long robe, while the other was wearing a full suit of plate armor. One of them seemed to be a scholar, while the other was a warrior. As soon as they entered, the two of them saw the soldier kneeling at the side. Their expressions immediately turned ugly. The soldier in plate armor took a step forward and kicked the officer, sending him tumbling. "Bastard, you're a disgrace to Xingshuan City." These two were the consul and the military chief of Xingshuan City. Coincidentally, when the soldier delivered the letter, both of them were present. When they received the commander-level monster hunter's token, they were immediately shocked. Xingshuan City was a large city, and it was located at the border. The status of these two was far from what the consul and military chief of a small city like Haoyue City could compare to. However, the monster hunters were existences that they could not afford to offend. The monster hunters were a group of their own, and they had the ability to supervise any local officials. Moreover, these people were existences that had gone through fire and water on the battlefield with the demons. There was once a survey that stated that any commander-level monster hunters member had killed at least 1,000 demons on the battlefield. It was not an exaggeration to say that every monster hunter was a hero of mankind. Therefore, even high-ranking officials like them did not dare to be careless. Fortunately, the two of them came together. "Where is he?" The military chief was rather hot-tempered. After kicking the officer down, he bellowed. The officer did not dare to resist at all. He raised his hand and pointed in the direction of Long Houchen. The consul and the military chief raised their heads to look at Long Houchen, and they were both stunned. It wasn't that they hadn't seen Long Houchen and Kai before, it was just that Long Houchen was really too young. No matter how they looked at him, he didn't seem like a demon hunter of a commander-grade demon hunt squad, let alone a captain. Seeing these two arrive, Long Houchen's expression darkened again. Although he was young, he had experienced life and death situations. He was also the leader of the monster hunters. He was usually calm and composed in commanding. He had seen many big scenes. Even the demon emperor could not scare him, let alone these two in front of him. I am the one who invited the two of you here. Please enlighten me. Long Houchen knew that his appearance was not very convincing. He did not want to waste any more time here. As he spoke, he waved his right hand at the military chief. The military chief was shocked to see that Long Houchen's right hand suddenly became transparent. It was the body of light that only a rank 7 temple knight could possess. Rank 7? This was a rank 7? Wasn't he too young? No, he must have disguised himself or taken some special medicine. The military chief and consul looked at each other and hurried forward. The consul, who was wearing a long robe, said, "Greetings, respected monster hunters. I am Star Search City's consul, Shui Mu. This is Star Search City's military chief, Han Qianyu." Long Houchen nodded. "Greetings, both of you. Both of you should already know what happened here. I hope that you can handle this matter properly and that something like this will not happen again. Otherwise, I will appeal to the Alliance and request that you be removed from your positions." Without any politeness, Long Houchen spoke his mind. Consul Shui Mu was a little better. His expression changed slightly before returning to normal, but the military chief, Han Qianyu, frowned. "May I know your name?" "General Class Monster Hunt 64 Commander, Long Houchen." Before he said this, he had already released a layer of golden light to envelop himself and the two important figures of Star Search City, isolating them from sound. Neither Shui Mu nor Han Qianyu had any doubts about Long Houchen's identity. He had the light attribute and the body of light. This was enough to prove everything. At the very least, it could not be sharp. "Greetings, Commander Long. It is true that these bastards have embarrassed the people of Star Search City today. We will naturally deal with them when we return. However, since you are the commander of monster hunters, you just need to do your job well. We don't need you to tell us how to enforce the law in Star Search City. As the highest-ranking military officer of Star Search City, I cannot be removed from my position with just a word from you." Han Qianyu's words were clearly filled with anger. Shui Mu tugged at him a few times, but was unable to stop him. Long Houchen was already suppressing his anger. When he heard Han Qianyu's words, his expression immediately turned ugly. He said coldly, "If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. The monster hunters have a supervisory function. I'm sure you know that, sir. Since you do not think that the soldiers under your command are in the wrong, I will report this matter to my superiors. Let's go, Kair." As he spoke, Long Houchen pulled Kair's hand and walked out, completely ignoring the two highest-ranking officers of Star Search City. "Tui, who do you think you are?" Han Qianyu couldn't help but curse angrily as he watched Long Houchen and Kair leave. Shui Mu smiled bitterly. "Old Han, why do you have to do this? The monster hunters are not easy to deal with. Besides, it was your subordinates who were in the wrong this time. If you had said a few words earlier, this matter would have passed." Han Qianyu laughed coldly. "I don't believe that they can do anything to me. Isn't it just collecting money from these trade associations? This bunch of trash can't even collect money properly. Come on, let's go back. Who cares about them? The monster hunters are only supervisors, and they are only general tier. In terms of rank, they have to be at least king tier monster hunters to be on equal footing with us. Who do they think they are? Do they think that they are so great just because they killed a few demons?" Long Houchen's hearing was very sensitive, and Han Qianyu had deliberately raised his voice. Naturally, every word of his conversation with Shui Mu had entered Long Houchen's ears. Han Qianyu wasn't just provoking Han Qianyu, but he was also confirming Long Houchen's words. Shui Mu was clearly much weaker than Han Qianyu. He wanted to stop him, but he knew that he didn't have the ability to do so. He thought to himself, "Aren't you giving me a handle?" However, he also knew that Han Qianyu had something to rely on. After all, Han Qianyu's father-in-law was the warrior temple's deputy temple master. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been suppressed by Han Qianyu, the military chief of Xingshuan City. At first, Long Houchen was a little regretful after he berated Han Qianyu. After all, Han Qianyu was the manager of a city, and he had been a little impulsive because of his anger. Although Han Qianyu's words weren't pleasant to hear, they were the truth. He had no right to interfere with a city's military affairs. He would report this matter to his superiors, but he didn't intend to interfere anymore. However, Han Qianyu's arrogance had thoroughly infuriated Long Houchen. Moreover, Han Qianyu had said that he supported the soldiers in accepting bribes. Kai could sense the change in Long Houchen's emotions. A cold intent emanated from her body. "Do you want me to go?" Long Houchen shook his head. "We can't do anything to them. They're officials of the Alliance. If we do anything, we'll be in the wrong. If we want to take the proper route, let's go back first. I have my own ways to deal with this. This person is obstinate and self-opinionated. He's no longer suitable to be the military chief of this city." After he finished speaking, he pulled Kai back to the hotel. The next morning, Long Houchen asked Sima Xian to make a trip to inform the people from Yuyi Commerce Association to meet them at the southeast stronghold. The group of 7 left Xingshuan City and headed straight for the southeast stronghold. Long Houchen didn't tell his companions about yesterday's incident. He decided to deal with it himself. After arriving at the southeast stronghold, they checked into the hotel that the Yuyi Commerce Association had agreed upon. Long Houchen walked out alone. Kai wanted to follow him, but Long Houchen stopped her. After a simple inquiry, Long Houchen found the destination of this trip, the Warrior Temple's main hall. "Please report that the General Class Monster Hunt 64's leader, Long Houchen, requests an audience with the Warrior Temple's temple master," Long Houchen said to the guard at the Warrior Temple's entrance. At the same time, he handed over his Monster Hunter's token. Those who were able to become guards of the Warrior Temple were naturally very discerning. They hurriedly gave Long Houchen a warrior's salute, took their command medallion, and went in to report. Although Long Houchen was only a general class leader of monster hunters, advancing to general class meant that he and his monster hunters could advance to king class or even overlord class in the future. This was different from the general class monster hunters treatment. The Temple League had 6 temples, each stationed in a stronghold to protect the Temple League's defense line. In the southeast, the Warrior Temple had the absolute right to speak. Since the southeast stronghold was the closest to the demon's central province, monster hunters would often pass by and visit the Warrior Temple's top management to communicate or even ask for help. Therefore, it was normal for Long Houchen to request an audience. As for whether it was the Warrior Temple's temple master who wanted to see him personally, it was hard to say. Long Houchen's gaze was calm. Today, he had specially put on his brilliant sacred armor before coming here. Not long after, the guard returned. At the same time, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s returned. The middle-aged man was dressed in a red outfit. He was very burly, even bigger than Sima Xian. He was surprised to see Long Houchen. "Hey, you're so young. You're the General Class Monster Hunt 64's leader, Long Houchen?" Long Houchen nodded. "Hello, I am." The middle-aged man laughed and said, "Captain Long, you're really young. I'm Su Zhongliang, the deputy leader of the Warrior Temple's battle hall. This way please." Captain Long, as he spoke, he gestured to Long Houchen to follow him. Long Houchen nodded and followed the deputy leader of the battle hall into the Warrior Temple. Compared to the Temple of the Priests, the warrior temple's architecture was less elegant. Instead, it was more simple and sturdy. After walking through the door, there was a huge hall. The 30-meter dome gave people a very spacious feeling. Directly opposite the door, in the middle of the warrior temple's hall, a statue stood there quietly. Seeing it, Long Houchen could not help but stop in his tracks. He respectfully gave the statue a standard knight's salute. His right fist pounded on his brilliant sacred armor, making a clanging sound. Su Zhongliang could not help but stop in his tracks. The way he looked at Long Houchen suddenly changed, and his impression of him increased greatly. This statue represented supreme glory to the warrior temple. It was wearing the knight's armor. It was clearly a knight. However, he respectfully saluted the statue at the first moment. How could he not have a good impression of this deputy leader of the battle hall? Moreover, Su Zhongliang looked rough on the surface, but his mind was very meticulous. He also had a good eye for people. He was completely sure that Long Houchen's respect for this statue came from the bottom of his heart. Of course, Long Houchen's respect came from the bottom of his heart. On top of the statue's head, there was a horizontal board with 4 big words, Millennium Sword. That's right, this was the statue of the radiant sword god Yi Wushang. It could be said that in the past hundreds of years, Yi Wushang was the most outstanding person to appear in the 6 great temples. He was even the most promising expert to lead the warrior temple to become the leader of the 6 great temples since the establishment of the temple. Unfortunately, this radiant sword god died too early. Chapter 130. In the beginning, after Yi Wushang fell in the battle with the demon emperor, all the warriors of the Temple League wore white scarves on their heads and mourned for him. It was also because of that battle that the status of the warrior temple rose sharply in the alliance. Unfortunately, for hundreds of years, the warrior temple did not have a genius like Yi Wushang. This was the first time that Long Houchen saw the statue of Yi Wushang. His appearance was not as outstanding as his reputation. He looked just like an ordinary person. The statue was carved with the posture of Yi Wushang holding a sword horizontally in front of his chest, faintly exuding a domineering spirit. However, after a short look, Long Houchen shook his head gently. Su Zhongliang's face changed. Captain Long Houchen sighed, "This statue is a pity. It did not carve Senior Yi Wushang's sword intent. This statue is just a dead object." In fact, this statue of Yi Wushang was already a master's work, but Long Houchen had seen better ones. At the end of the first floor of the Tower of Eternity, the statue of the holy law god of necromancy, the sleeping calamity Electrolux, had really touched him too much. It perfectly reproduced the powerful aura of a holy law god, and even its demeanor and thoughts were revealed. It was like a real person. In contrast, this statue of Yi Wushang was naturally much worse. After listening to Long Houchen's words, Su Zhongliang's good impression of him disappeared immediately. He said in a deep voice, "Captain Long, please don't criticize the hero statue of our warrior temple. Otherwise, even if you are a demon hunter, I will still challenge you. In order to maintain the dignity of the warrior temple." Long Houchen was slightly stunned. Only then did he realize that his words were a bit abrupt. "I'm sorry, I apologize to you. I was impulsive. It's just that Senior Yi Wushang was the Millennium Sword. It is a pity that his sword intent was not shown through the statue. If it's possible, maybe someone will really be able to comprehend something from it." Su Zhongliang looked seriously at Long Houchen and thought that this young man did not seem to be faking it. He sighed and said, "It is too difficult to display General Ye's sword intent through the statue. Even back then, none of Marshal Ye's direct descendants could truly imitate Marshal Ye's sword intent, let alone now." "Marshal Ye?" Long Houchen asked curiously. Su Zhongliang said, "Marshal Yi was not only the hall master of our warrior temple, he was also the commander-in-chief of the southeastern fortress. The seniors all called him by that name." Long Houchen nodded silently and said, "Hall Master Su, When can I meet the hall master of your temple? Su Zhongliang was stunned for a moment. He thought that this kid really wants to meet the hall master. He seems to think too highly of himself. Long Haochen naturally saw through the doubts in his mind, and earnestly said, Hall Master Su, I have come to the warrior temple this time for 3 matters. I can ask for your help on 2 of them, but the most important matter is that I must meet with the temple master. Su Zhongliang frowned and said, I'm afraid that's a bit difficult. The hall master is very busy. Long Haochen faced the statue and said indifferently, What if it's about Senior Yi Wushang? Su Zhongliang was shocked. About Marshal Yi? Leader Long, can you tell me what it is first? Long Haochen did not hesitate. He nodded and said, I think I should be able to do the suggestion I just made. I can let this statue have Marshal Ye's sword intent. Su Zhongliang sucked in a breath of cold air. No matter how much he didn't believe it, he didn't open his mouth to question Long Haochen, because he was very clear that even if an Emperor-grade demon hunt squad captain was here, he wouldn't make such a joke with the warrior temple. If it really was just a joke, then the damage to the warrior temple would be too great. No one could bear the consequences. Leader Long Yu. Su Zhongliang didn't know how to express his current emotions. Of course, he hoped that it was true. However, this Leader Long was too young. Long Haochen raised his right hand and said sincerely, I just came from the holy city with my teammate. I wonder if the warrior temple has received any news about the awakening of Senior Ye's godly sword in the holy city a few months ago? Su Zhongliang could clearly feel his heartbeat speeding up. Of course they had heard about this. The warrior temple had also sent a deputy temple master to investigate this matter personally. However, when they found Marshal Ye's descendant, Yi Weiyang refused to reveal who had obtained Marshal Ye's heavy sword. He only said that if that person was willing, he would naturally contact the warrior temple. Moreover, the godly sword had already recognized that person as its master. Because that person was a knight, it was impossible for him to return to the warrior temple. This matter shocked the higher-ups of the warrior temple. However, as Yi Weiyang was the descendant of Marshal Yi, they couldn't force him. They could only secretly look for the knight who had inherited Yi Wushang's godly sword, Arya of the Goddess of Light. They even asked the Knights Templars to cooperate with them. However, after a few months, that person still hadn't shown up. At this moment, hearing Long Haochen mention this matter, Su Zhongliang's shock could be imagined. However, what shocked him even more had yet to come. Su Zhongliang saw Long Haochen's right hand. A right hand that was completely golden. A gentle golden light quietly rose. Then, an awe-inspiring sword intent suddenly bloomed. The huge golden sword was already raised high above his head. The spiritual pearl at the tip of the sword emitted a bright golden light. The sword intent was not only emitted from this godly sword, but also from Long Haochen's body. The impact on Su Zhongliang at this moment was too great. Just by standing there, what Long Haochen gave him was a kind of unparalleled unity between man and sword. It should be known that as the deputy hall master of the battle hall, Su Zhongliang's internal spiritual energy cultivation exceeded 90,000. He was a powerhouse at the peak of the 8th rank. However, at this moment, facing Long Haochen, he actually felt very small. Not only him, but everyone who was passing through the hall of the warrior temple also stopped because of this sudden golden light. Of course, they wouldn't have any hostility. That was light attribute, so it couldn't be an enemy. However, the monstrous sword intent that followed made everyone sluggish. At this moment, they even had an illusion that the figure blooming with golden light was the real statue of General Yi, while the tall figure on the other side was just a dead object. The contrast was too strong. The tyrannical sword intent seemed to pierce through the dome of the warrior temple, and the figure who was one with the sword was even more tall. After nearly a year of closed-door training, Long Haochen's harvest could be imagined. What he inherited was not only the godly sword, Arya of the Goddess of Light, but also its sword intent. At the same time, he also integrated this sword intent with his understanding of the sword that repelled a bow when he was awakened as a god-favored. It formed his own unique sword intent. There was no doubt that this was the help brought to him by his powerful talent as a god-favored. To be precise, the sword intent that Long Haochen displayed at this moment was somewhat different from that of Yi Wuxiang back then, and it was far from comparable to Yi Wuxiang's understanding of the sword. However, he held the aria of the goddess of light in his hand, and with the help of sword intent, how could the entire warrior temple not be shocked? Su Zhongliang was the first to salute the aria of the goddess of light with the highest warrior etiquette. Then, all the warriors present bowed respectfully in unison. The golden light converged, and the aria of the goddess of light disappeared from Long Haochen's hand, along with the tyrannical sword intent. Looking at Long Haochen's burning gaze, Su Zhongliang nodded vigorously. "Commander Long, please wait for a moment. I will report to the temple lord immediately." After he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and left. Long Haochen was still standing in the same place, silently looking at the statue in front of him. Although this statue didn't have the sword intent of the sword god of light Yi Wuxiang, the tragic aura of his disdainfully sweeping across the battlefield deeply touched Long Haochen's heart. Vaguely, he had a different understanding of his own sword intent. This trip to the warrior temple was obviously not because of the military chief of Xingshuan City. That was just a small matter that came along the way. The more important reason for his trip was to return Yi Wuxiang's sword intent to the warrior temple. This was also the reason why he insisted on meeting the warrior temple lord. Not long after, more than 10 people came down from the staircase on the side of the hall. The one walking at the front was an old man in a golden robe. This old man already had a head full of silver hair, but when he walked, he gave off a strong oppressive force, as if a mountain was crashing down on people. Su Zhongliang and some other high-ranking members of the warrior temple lord followed behind this old man, and went straight to Long Haochen. The old man in the golden robe was full of excitement, and he strode to Long Haochen's side. However, Long Haochen did not seem to see him, and was still staring at the statue of the Millennium Sword. Su Zhongliang was about to speak, but he was stopped by the old man in the golden robe. A strange light flashed in the old man's eyes, and he turned around to signal everyone to be quiet, so that they would not disturb Long Haochen. He stood by Long Haochen's side, sizing up the handsome young man. After almost an hour, Long Haochen's eyes suddenly lit up, and he took a step forward with his left foot. He swung his right hand forward at lightning speed, and a faint golden light flashed. He let out a long sigh that was full of pleasure, and in the next moment, the entire hall was suddenly filled with a sharp howl. The howl disappeared in an instant, but the high-ranking members of the warrior temple lord who were standing at the side were all shocked. They could clearly feel the ferocity of Long Haochen's right hand when he swung it out. There was no fluctuation of spiritual power, just pure sword will. Who was this young man? Your Long Haochen? The old man in the golden robe finally spoke, and his voice was trembling. Long Haochen was shocked, and only then did he realize that he was surrounded by people. He quickly turned around, and happened to meet the old man in the golden robe's emotional gaze. "Senior, you are," Su Zhongliang hurriedly said. "This is the master of our warrior temple, Master Qiu Yonghao." Long Haochen stomped his left foot on the ground, and his right fist knocked on his chest. "Commander Level Monster Hunt 64 Commander Long Haochen greets you, Master." Qiu Yonghao had been looking at him for a full hour. "You must be Brother Xingyu's son. You're indeed a young hero. I didn't expect General Ye's sword to recognize you as its master. Can you let us see General Ye's aria of the Goddess of Light first?" He really couldn't wait. "Okay." Long Haochen raised his right hand again, and when the brilliant golden light appeared in front of all the leaders of the warrior temple lord again, they were all stunned, especially the older powerhouses of the warrior temple lord, who couldn't help but cry. Among them, The one who was the most emotional was the master of the warrior temple Chiao Yonghao. Big brother, I finally see your sword again. I finally see it shine again. Big brother, why didn't you listen to me back then? You became a hero of humanity, a hero of the warrior temple, but do you know? I lost you, my good brother, forever. Chiao Yonghao took a step forward, and actually held the aria of the goddess of light tightly with both hands, and cried bitterly. All the powerhouses of the warrior temple lord once again, thinking of the sword in Long Haochen's hand, and gave the highest warrior salute. Feeling their sorrow and nostalgia, Long Haochen's eyes couldn't help but gradually turn red. What was even more shocking was that the aria of the goddess of light in his hand seemed to understand Chiao Yonghao's words, and actually made a slight buzzing sound, as if the sword was also crying. After a long time, Chiao Yonghao gradually recovered from his sorrow. Wiping away the snot and tears on his face, this white-haired old man looked at Long Haochen with red and swollen eyes. Child, did you specially bring General Ye's sword back? I thank you on behalf of the warrior temple. Long Haochen nodded lightly and said, Temple Lord, please restrain your grief. It was only by coincidence that I was able to let the divine sword shine once more, but it is far too precious to the warrior temple. Therefore, although I obtained the sword's recognition as its master, I must obtain the permission of you and the seniors of the warrior temple lord before I can use it as my weapon. I promise you and everyone here that I will not let Senior Ye's sword be covered in dust in my hands. Chiao Yonghao slightly paused. Although he was very emotional, there was still a hidden meaning in his words just now. He said that Long Haochen would return the sword, and not to show it. This meant that he wanted to take back the aria of the goddess of light. But Long Haochen didn't respond, and instead firmly expressed his attitude towards the sword, as well as the fact that it had recognized him as its master. Long Haochen, then why did you come today? Chiao Yonghao asked lightly. Long Haochen said respectfully, I came today for 3 matters, the most important one of which requires the consent of you and the warrior temple. Although I can't keep the sword, I hope to be able to leave Senior Ye's sword intent in the warrior temple lord, because it should belong to the warrior temple lord. Chiao Yonghao was slightly stunned. Leave Senior Ye's sword intent? What do you want to do? He was getting more and more curious about this young man. Of course, deep in his heart, he naturally hoped to be able to keep the aria of the goddess of light. However, he was very clear about Long Haochen's position in the Knights Templars. Han Qiu had said that this kid was the only heir of the Knights Templars, and also the future Temple Lord of the Knights Templars. It was impossible to force him to leave the sword. Not to mention, his father was not easy to deal with. Long Haochen looked at the statue of Yi Wushang and said in a deep voice, Temple Lord, if you agree, I hope to leave my suggestion on this statue, so that in the future, every powerhouse in the warrior Temple Lord can see it, and even learn something from it. This is also the only thing I can do for the warrior temple lord. If Long Haochen said this as soon as they met, Chiao Yonghao would definitely have a bad opinion of this young man. These words were too arrogant. Back then, there were so many powerhouses in the warrior temple lord, but none of them were able to carve out Senior Ye's sword intent. Although Chiao Yonghao didn't know the exact age of Long Haochen, he could vaguely guess that he was definitely less than 20 years old. However, just now, the sword intent that Long Haochen slashed out with his right hand had greatly shocked Chiao Yonghao. He was completely sure that even if it was Senior Yi, at his age, it was impossible for him to have such attainments in swordsmanship. This young man was indeed blessed by the heavens. After pondering for a moment, Chiao Yonghao slowly turned around, faced the group of warrior temple lord, and said in a deep voice, What do you think? An old man who looked to be about the same age as Chiao Yonghao said in a deep voice, This is not appropriate. Senior Ye's statue has been standing for hundreds of years. How can it be touched so easily? This is not something we can decide. If the statue is damaged, we won't be able to answer to the millions of warriors in the Temple Lord. Su Zhongliang said, Temple Lord, Deputy Temple Lord, I think we should let him try. Long Haochen was able to inherit Senior Ye's divine sword. This in itself shows that the divine sword has acknowledged him, and only he can have some understanding of Senior Ye's sword intent. No. The old man who was addressed as Deputy Temple Lord said resolutely, What if he fails? Can we afford this kind of loss? We must first consider the worst consequences before doing anything. Only when we can bear the worst outcome can we take action. There was no doubt that this old man could be considered as a conservative in the Warrior Temple Lord. Next, the group of experts in the Warrior Temple Lord expressed their opinions. Most of them did not want to let Long Haochen modify Yi Wushang's statue. Of course, it was not that they did not want Senior Ye's sword intent to reappear. It was just that Long Haochen was really too young. In their eyes, this successor of Senior Ye's divine sword was still just a child. How could they feel at ease leaving such an important matter to a child? Looking at everyone's argument, Long Haochen secretly sighed in his heart and said to Qiu Yonghao, Temple Lord, how about this? I won't directly make a move on Senior Ye's statue. Please find me a big rock. I will try to leave Senior Ye's sword intent on this big rock. However, I can only make a move once, because we are about to leave the Alliance and enter the territory of the demons to carry out our mission. He had to do this. The fundamental purpose of Long Haochen coming here was to obtain the Warrior Temple Lord's recognition of him possessing the aria of the Goddess of Light. At the same time, he also wanted to repay the Warrior Temple. After all, if he did not give an explanation to the Warrior Temple Lord, there would definitely be a lot of trouble in the future. He wanted to leave the sword intent in the Warrior Temple Lord to prove that he was qualified to control this divine sword. Qiu Yonghao nodded and said, In that case we can only do so. However, Long Haochen, I have a presumptuous request. You also know that the aria of the Goddess of Light is too important to the Warrior Temple Lord. If possible, we still hope that the divine sword can stay in the Warrior Temple Lord. You can ask for any conditions. As long as it is within our ability, we will definitely satisfy you. Qiu Yonghao could also see that if he did not say it directly, Long Haochen would definitely not leave the divine sword behind. However, this was not surprising. If it was anyone else, they would probably do the same. After all, this was a powerful divine sword. Although Qiu Yonghao could see that the divine sword in Long Haochen's hands could not fully restore its former glory, it was still a powerful legendary weapon. It would not be easy for anyone who had such a divine sword to take it out. Long Haochen looked at Qiu Yonghao, but shook his head and said, Temple Lord, I can't. The aria of the Goddess of Light has recognized me as its master, and only I can use it. I think that Senior Knight also does not want to see the divine sword stay in the dark room. I will take it with me to run amok among the demons and kill strong enemies. Only by drinking the blood of the demons can this divine sword truly regain its light and recondense its sword's soul. So, I can only refuse you. Qiu Yonghao said in a deep voice. What if I use an epic equipment to exchange with you? It is also of the light attribute. Long Haochen's heart trembled. Of course, he knew what an epic equipment meant. It should be known that in the current era, people who possessed an epic equipment were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. The reason why the Knights Templars had always been the leader of the 6 great temples was because the Knights Templars possessed a godly weapon, the Throne of God. However, the Warrior Temple did not have a single godly weapon. Epic equipment was already the strongest weapon the Warrior Temple could offer. According to Long Haochen's knowledge, the Warrior Temple did not have more than 5 pieces of epic equipment. Without a doubt, any piece of epic equipment could increase his strength to a whole new level. This was undoubtedly a huge temptation. However, Long Haochen still shook his head. I'm sorry, Temple Lord. To me, this divine sword is even more important than a godly weapon. Using it in battle will allow me to experience Senior Knight's glory in the past. Whether it is the improvement of my strength or the tempering of my willpower, it is extraordinary. Moreover, as I said earlier, with this divine sword, I will make it shine as brightly as it did in the past. Young man, you are too arrogant. The elderly deputy temple lord took 2 steps forward and arrived beside Qiu Yonghao. An enormous pressure enveloped Long Haochen like a mountain. Everyone present was a powerhouse from the warrior temple. Although they could not actually attack Long Haochen, they could still put some pressure on him. Facing the sudden pressure, Long Haochen's expression remained unchanged. He straightened his back and said respectfully, "This junior does not feel that I am arrogant. I am merely stating a fact. Otherwise, I would not have appeared in the warrior temple. If I had only used the aria of the goddess of light in battle against the demons, I am afraid that the warrior temple would not have discovered that I am the owner of this divine sword. Today I have come with absolute sincerity." Qiu Yonghao waved his hand, blocking the pressure released by the old man. He was inwardly shocked. It must be known that even if Long Haochen really relied on his own cultivation to become the captain of a commander-grade demon hunt squad, he would only be at the 6th step. Facing the powerful pressure of a 9th step powerhouse, he was still able to speak with confidence and composure. This was not something an ordinary person could do. "Haochen, how about this? You said earlier that you are willing to accept the test of our warrior temple. Since we are of the same family, we will naturally not send anyone to spar with you. According to what you said, if you can leave behind the Knight Marshal's sword intent on a rock, it will prove that you have the right to use this divine sword. Otherwise, you can leave the divine sword behind, and we will still be willing to give you an epic-grade equipment." If it was any other equipment, Qiu Yonghao would definitely not be like this. This was already somewhat of a bully. However, the aria of the goddess of light was too important to the warrior temple. Even if it was left behind and no one could use it, it would still be good. Long Haochen looked at Qiu Yonghao's burning gaze and took a deep breath. "All right, I promise you. However, if I can't do it, I will leave the divine sword behind, but I don't want an epic-grade equipment from your warrior temple. Please bring the rock over." He could understand the anxiety of these experts from the warrior temple. However, under the pressure of the crowd, Long Haochen's pride had been ignited. "I will prove to you that I have the right to wield the divine sword." Qiu Yonghao's eyes revealed an apologetic look, as he turned around and gave a few orders. Naturally, someone went to carry it out. The elderly deputy temple master also left in a hurry. Long Haochen did not continue the conversation with Qiu Yonghao. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and entered a meditative state under the watchful eyes of so many people. The entire process was as natural as water flowing when the conditions were right. Almost as soon as he sat down, he was like an old monk in meditation or like a solid rock. This kid's future was bound to be extraordinary. Qiu Yonghao could not help but admire him again, and was even a little jealous of the Knights Templars. To have such achievements at such a young age, this Long Haochen would definitely be a mainstay of the Knights Templars in the future. If his development went smoothly, then the Knights Templars would have another amazing genius. He might even surpass his father. Long Xingwu became a Knight of the Seal in his 40s. What about him? How old would he be when he fused with the throne of God? 40 years old? Or less than 40 years old? Not long after, more than 10 experts from the warrior temple carried a giant rock into the hall. Seeing this giant rock, Qiu Yonghao's expression changed, and he gave the deputy temple master a questioning look. The deputy temple master nodded at him seriously, and his lips moved as if he was saying something. Qiu Yonghao hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. When he looked at Long Haochen, who was in a meditative state again, the apologetic look in his eyes deepened. This giant rock was oval in shape, and it was slightly bigger at the bottom. It was completely black, but it emitted a special aura. It was calm and deep. It did not look like a rock, but more like a deep cave. It had a history. It was a meteorite that the warrior temple had obtained from outer space. It was extremely hard. Even a Radiance-grade equipment would have a hard time leaving a mark on it. A legendary-grade equipment would also need to inject a large amount of spiritual energy to cut it. Moreover, this meteorite's spiritual energy conductivity was comparable to that of adamantine, and its hardness was far beyond that of adamantine. It was just that no master alchemist had the confidence to forge it into a piece of equipment, so it had always been kept in the warrior temple's treasury. Today they actually took this meteorite out. Their goal was undoubtedly to make things difficult for Long Houchen. Even if he had the ability to leave behind sword intent, he would need to have the cultivation to cut this meteorite. That was not something that could be done with just a little bit of spiritual energy. As if sensing that the giant rock was in place, Long Houchen slowly opened his eyes. His gaze fell directly on the 3-meter-tall meteorite, and a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. Qiu Yonghao coughed and said, "Since we want to leave behind Marshal Ye's sword intent, of course we want it to be passed down through the ages. That's why we took out the best material. Long Houchen, do you think this meteorite will do? If it doesn't work, we'll switch to another one." He was really a little embarrassed. He had lived for more than 100 years, but he had to scheme against a teenager. If the higher-ups of the Knights Templars found out about this, he would really be too ashamed to face anyone. Therefore, he settled for the next best thing, which was to ask Long Houchen if he was willing to change the rock. However, to Qiu Yonghao's surprise, Long Houchen shook his head and said, "There's no need to change it. I'll take this one. However, I have a small request. Since we're using this meteorite to carve, can you give me the scrap that I cut off?" "Sure. However, that's under the condition that you're able to leave behind the sword intent." The elderly deputy spoke first, as if he was afraid that Long Houchen would go back on his word. However, they did not know that it was not Long Houchen's first time seeing this meteorite. His father, Long Xingwu, also had a piece of it. Therefore, he knew very well how hard the meteorite was. Back then, Long Xingwu had told Long Houchen that there was a treasure in the warrior temple, which was this meteorite. If it could be refined or integrated into a piece of equipment, even if it was just a small piece, it could improve the quality of the equipment. The effect was even more obvious when it was used on a weapon. Long Houchen stood up slowly and walked toward the meteorite. He had never carved anything before, and he had no knowledge about carving at all. However, what he wanted to do today was not to carve any form, but to leave behind the sword intent. That was a completely different concept. Long Houchen only stopped when he was 5 meters away from the meteorite. He stood there and stared at the meteorite that was emitting a profound aura. Nobody interrupted him, and they just watched in silence. Qiu Yonghao's emotions were very complicated. He did not even know if he should hope for Long Houchen to succeed or fail. However, whether he succeeded or failed, it would not be a bad thing for the warrior temple. "I need the help of a mount and a spiritual stove," Long Houchen said calmly. He did not even turn around. Qiu Yonghao said, "Of course." Long Houchen nodded and pointed his left hand to his side. Suddenly, a purple light flashed, and a huge creature appeared in everyone's sight. Hao Yue's shock was quite strong. Its 10-meter-long body was like a small hill, and what was more peculiar were its 4 big heads with different horns. After appearing next to Long Houchen, it suddenly looked very imposing. With their necks straightened, Little Light, Little Fire, Little Green, and Little Blue looked at the people in the warrior temple at the same time, with a kind of arrogance. "What kind of mount is this?" Qiu Yonghao and the deputy temple master next to him looked at each other in shock. They had never seen such a magical beast before. Although the spiritual energy waves emitted by this magical beast were not very strong to them, it seemed to have a special quality. Even if it looked arrogant, it still gave people a feeling that it was only natural. At this moment, a low chanting sound began to come from Haoyue's 4 big heads, and they made a very strange posture. Only Little Light's neck was straight, while the other 3 heads were crouching down, attached to Little Light's neck, and looked up at Little Light as they continued chanting. Immediately, the 4 elements of wind, fire, water, and light fluctuated violently from Haoyue's body. A magical beast of 4 elements? Su Zhongliang could not help but exclaim in a low voice. Qiu Yonghao's gaze immediately became even more serious. He suddenly felt a little regretful. He regretted making things difficult for this child. Long Haochen wasn't wrong. If he hadn't come today, the warrior temple wouldn't even have been able to see the aria of the goddess of light. This child had come with good intentions, yet he was treated like this by them. However, on the other side was the aria of the goddess of light. For the first time, Qiu Yonghao felt that he was in such a difficult position. At this moment, Long Haochen moved. Brilliant golden light suddenly shone from his back, and 4 spiritual wings spread out at the same time, valiantly absorbing the light elements in the air. At the same time, Long Haochen raised his right hand, and the aria of the goddess of light appeared in his grasp again. An even more bizarre scene was yet to come. A golden figure seemed to have stepped out from Long Haochen's body, and when he spread his 4 wings, the golden figure also appeared in everyone's sight. A golden battle dress, a golden staff, beautiful golden hair, and 6 transparent golden wings. More importantly, she actually had the same substance and height as a human, and only a pair of pointy little ears revealed her origins. Ancient elves! The elderly deputy temple master could not help but exclaim. For decades, he had been the authority in researching ancient elves in the warrior temple. However, he had never seen what real ancient elves looked like. When Yiting appeared in front of everyone, everything was exactly the same as the ancient elves in his imagination. How could he not be surprised? No, this is an elemental elf. Qiu Yonghao was the deputy temple master of the warrior temple after all, and his perception was also the strongest. However, after refuting his old friend's words, he was also shocked. Although he could feel that this was an elemental elf, who had ever seen an elemental elf that looked like an ancient elf? Long Haochen, how much more shock do you want to bring us before you are willing to give up? This time, not only did Qiu Yonghao regret, but even the deputy temple master, who had always been very tough, felt a little remorseful. Chapter 131. Yiting naturally did not care what others thought of her. Just like Haoyue, she immediately started chanting the incantation the moment she appeared. A thick golden light instantly spread out from her body, and then surged towards Long Haochen. Long Haochen raised his head and gazed at the aria of the goddess of light in his hands. He did not chant any incantation himself, and his entire mind was completely focused on this divine sword. The huge sword light that the aria of the goddess of light emitted gradually retracted under his gaze, converging into the blade. But, with every retraction, the aria of the goddess of light would become a little more solid, and its color would change from brilliant gold to dark gold. Long Haochen's eyes were like lightning. At this moment, he seemed to have completely fused with this divine sword. It was as if the aria of the goddess of light was only the sharpness of the entire body, and he himself was the blade. The tyrannical sword intent continued to rise, and the gold color on Long Haochen's body also began to become more and more intense. At this moment, it was as if he had returned to that little hill in the illusory paradise. It was not just enlightenment but also a kind of arrogance. Even if he was facing a rank 9 powerhouse now, he would not cower in the slightest. Haoyue and Yiting's spiritual energy continued to pour into Long Haochen, and Haoyue was using the light attribute spirit increasing technique that he was proficient in. But this time, it was not just Light who was using it, but the other 3 heads had all converted their own attributes to the light attribute, and used all their strength to support Long Haochen. Yiting was using the simplest dazzling heaven and earth magic, but her dazzling heaven and earth increased Long Houchen's spiritual energy by more than 3 times as much as ordinary dazzling heaven and earth. And this light attribute spiritual energy had all been purified by her. It was not an exaggeration to say that, apart from being unable to increase the total amount of spiritual energy in his body, Long Houchen's continuous battle strength was at least equivalent to a powerhouse with a spiritual energy of 20,000. Yuting and Haoyue's ability to support him could only be described as terrifying. Finally, the aria of the Goddess of Light turned completely dark gold in Long Houchen's hands. Even his body became the same color. This feeling wasn't strange, but it was incomparably powerful. The towering sword could be felt even outside the warrior temple. It was as if this sword could split the heavens and earth apart. At this moment, Long Houchen made his move. He stepped forward with his left foot and slashed out with his heavy sword. Simple, direct, and without any flourishes. Saint Hua Azura slash. Although Long Houchen didn't use the ready skill, when he slashed out with his sword, the sword intent that had already condensed into a solid substance drained all of his spiritual power. There was no sound, and there was no leakage of spiritual power. Everyone only saw a flash of dark golden light. The sharp sword even caused a large number of decorations in the warrior temple to crack. The powerhouses in the warrior temple had to activate their own spiritual power to protect themselves. They had to protect themselves just by sensing the presence of the sword intent. What if they were to face this sword for real? Qiu Yonghao's expression really changed this time, because he realized that if he was the one facing this sword, even if he could kill Long Houchen, he wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. This child's cultivation was not even at the Type 7 realm, while Qiu Yonghao was an experienced Type 9 powerhouse. However, to everyone's surprise, the meteorite from outer space was still standing there motionlessly. Long Houchen, who had slashed out with the sword, collapsed to the ground as though he was exhausted. It was Yuting who hugged him from behind that he didn't fall. Gentle golden light continuously blossomed from Yuting's body and fused into Long Houchen's body. Haoyue's 4 large heads also slowly lifted up, and his 4 heads and 8 eyes all turned purple. The 9 purple light patterns on Long Houchen's forehead appeared again. However, after the awakening of the God-favored's constitution, his light patterns had turned purplish gold. Long Houchen's body trembled slightly, and he slowly stood up. The aria of the Goddess of Light had already turned golden and entered his right hand. After slashing out with the sword just now, he actually fell into a temporary state of unconsciousness. It was Haoyue and Yuting's continuous treatment that allowed him to recover. However, it was all worth it. The sword just now had clearly allowed Long Houchen to comprehend the sword intent that he had comprehended from looking at Yi Wushang's statue. It was no exaggeration to say that his understanding of the sword intent had reached an extremely deep level. It was at least equivalent to Yi Wushang when he was 30 years old. None of the powerhouses in the warrior temple spoke, because they didn't know what to say. Although it seemed like Long Houchen had failed, the terrifying sword intent just now was too powerful. The ones who felt it the most were Qiu Yonghao and the deputy temple master, who had personally witnessed Yi Wushang's battle. At that moment, they seemed to think that Yi Wushang had been resurrected. Based on the sword intent alone, they understood that Long Houchen was indeed qualified to use the aria of the Goddess of Light. There wasn't a single person like him in the entire warrior temple. Long Houchen. Qiu Yonghao took a few steps forward, wanting to comfort this child. He was even thinking whether he could convince the higher-ups of the warrior temple to let this child become the owner of this divine sword. Long Houchen turned his head back weakly, and forced a smile at Qiu Yonghao. He was so weak that he couldn't even speak. If it weren't for Haoyue and Yuting, he might even have fallen into a deep coma. That move just now had consumed too much of his energy. Not only did it drain his spiritual energy, but it also drained all of his energy and stamina. He was so weak that he couldn't even lift a finger. Of course, this situation was getting better. Hao Yue and Yiting cooperated very well. A layer of faint purple light kept spreading from Hao Yue's body. As the purple light poured into Long Haochen's body, his stamina was recovering bit by bit, and Yiting was providing him with the purest light element. Qiu Yonghao sighed and said, "Child, I have a suggestion. Although you have failed, you have done very well. I understand that, at least for now, you are the only one who can control this divine sword. The Arya of the Goddess of Light has also chosen a very good owner. You are the son of Long Xingwu, and the successor of the Knights Templars. I shouldn't say this, but you should know that the Arya of the Goddess of Light is very important to the Warrior Temple. I can't offer anything more precious than my own position. If you are willing, then from this moment on, you will be the Temple Master of the Warrior Temple. I will be the Deputy Temple Master and assist you with all my strength. You also don't need to carry out your Monster Hunter's mission anymore. As the Temple Master of the Warrior Temple, your training and everything else will be supported by all the resources of the Warrior Temple. I also believe that in the near future, you will be the second Knight Marshal." When he said this, Qiu Yonghao was very excited. It wasn't difficult for him to make this decision. It could even be said that it was done in an instant. He didn't discuss it with anyone. He believed that he had the ability to convince the other people in the Warrior Temple. His words were not the least bit flattering, but completely from the bottom of his heart. Long Haochen was really too outstanding. As a Type 9 powerhouse, Qiu Yonghao could clearly see that whether it was his mount or his light elemental sprite, they were all extraordinary. Not to mention the 2 pairs of spiritual wings on his body, which revealed his unlimited strength in the future. Perhaps Long Haochen's current cultivation base was only at the Type 6 level, but Qiu Yonghao was completely sure that even a Type 7 powerhouse might not be able to contend against him. When a young powerhouse like Long Haochen appeared in front of him, he couldn't suppress the love in his heart. However, Long Haochen already had too many unique things. What could he give him? What could attract him enough to leave the Knights Templars and become a member of the Warrior Temple, and at the same time, leave the Arya of the Goddess of Light in the Warrior Temple forever? In such a short period of time, the only thing he could think of was his own position as the Warrior Temple's Temple Master. The Temple League was formed by 6 major temples. To be able to become a Temple Master of one of them, that was equivalent to being one of the 6 powerhouses of the entire Temple League. This position and honor was already the pinnacle of what a human could achieve. Only those legend rankers of the Monster Hunters could compare to him. The moment these words came out, everyone was shocked. Almost every powerhouse from the Warrior Temple let out gasps of shock. They never imagined that the Temple Master would actually say such words. Furthermore, with Qiu Yonghao's position, since he had said these words, he would definitely not take them back. Even the Alliance could not stop him. Of course, whether Long Haochen could truly become the Temple Master of the Warrior Temple would still depend on the decision of the upper echelons of the temple. However, Qiu Yonghao's position in the Warrior Temple was extremely high. With his promise, Long Haochen was practically sitting on the throne of the Warrior Temple. "Senior, you," Long Haochen said weakly. Qiu Yonghao said seriously, "I will never change my words, nor will I regret them. As long as you are willing to take the position of the Warrior Temple's Temple Master, it will be the beginning of a glorious era for the Warrior Temple. Although you are still young, in the future, you will definitely be the pride of the Warrior Temple. You might even surpass Marshal Yi. Come, child. The doors of the Warrior Temple are all open to you. From now on, you can make the decisions in the Warrior Temple." Qiu Yonghao's words were undoubtedly full of temptation. It could be said that in the 6,000 years since the establishment of the Temple League, this was the first time such a situation had happened. Moreover, Qiu Yonghao still did not know Long Haochen's true age. For a 16-year-old youth to be given the important position of the Warrior Temple's Temple Master, this was simply unheard of. At this time, The emotions of the upper echelons of the warrior temple had gradually calmed down. Moreover, everyone's eyes began to reveal a peculiar expression. Qiu Yonghao's words were directed at Long Haochen, but how could it not be directed at them? They had witnessed everything that Long Haochen had shown just now. If this youth could really become the warrior temple's temple master, then after 10 or 20 years, he would surely bring a bright future to the warrior temple. The warrior temple's deputy temple master, who had been very domineering before, strode to Qiu Yonghao's side. Just when Qiu Yonghao thought that his old friend was going to object to his decision, the old man said resolutely, "I agree with Brother Qiu's decision, child. As long as you are willing, you will be the most powerful person in the warrior temple from now on." If Qiu Yonghao's promise had at least allowed Long Haochen to sit on half of the warrior temple's throne, then the words of the experienced deputy temple master had confirmed everything. As long as Long Haochen agreed, then he would really, seniors, I'm really sorry. I can't. I'm a member of the Knights Templars. Moreover, I'm now a demon hunter, and also the leader of a team of monster hunters. I have to be responsible for my companions. Moreover, I didn't fail. While the two temple masters and the deputy temple master were talking, Long Haochen's strength had finally recovered a little. At least he had the strength to speak. He actually rejected it? The two old men were a little stunned. Also, what did he say? He didn't fail? Long Haochen gave Haoyue a look. Then, Haoyue's huge body slightly tilted. He lifted his tail and gently swept it towards the meteorite. With a loud bang, at least 1/3 of the meteorite fell to the ground. It was really heavy. A loud bang was heard when it hit the ground. But at the same time, it shocked everyone present. Everyone was very clear about how tough the meteorite was. Not to mention cutting a whole piece, even cutting off a small piece was incomparably difficult. So he did not fail. Instead, he cut off such a big piece of the meteorite. However, including all the Type 9 powerhouses present, no one saw Long Haochen's sword clearly. It was as though when the sword slashed out, even the light was swallowed. Qiu Yonghao only felt his throat was a little dry. At this time, he actually did not know what to say. He had nothing to say, and the powerhouses of the warrior temple present also had nothing to say. At this moment, even Qiu Yonghao's mind was blank. Using this short period of time, Long Haochen's physical strength recovered a little. He stood up and slowly walked to the meteorite with the help of Yiting. The golden light shone, and the light of the eternal melody enveloped the meteorite. 1/3 of the meteorite disappeared in an instant. This was what they had agreed before. Because of the warrior temple's attitude, Long Haochen directly cut off 1/3 of the meteorite. This naturally became his reward this time. But, did the warrior temple really lose? The answer was no. Yiting pointed the staff in her hand at the remaining 2/3 of the meteorite. A golden light flashed, and the meteorite seemed to let out a slight buzz. Then, a majestic sword will bloomed from the smooth, mirror-like surface. The fierce sword will rushed up to the sky and slowly fell back. The powerful sword will finally gathered within a 3-meter radius of the meteorite and slowly bloomed outwards. It was not as fierce as before, but this sword will was more solid. Yes, Long Haochen's sword left all his sword will in this meteorite. Otherwise, he would not have become so weak. Of course, his own sword will not disappear. He only needed his body to recover. And this meteorite would not disappear for at least 100 years. Stimulated by Yiting's spiritual power, the sword will was released. This was the most precious thing that Long Haochen left for the warrior temple. Every warrior present was speechless. Qiu Yonghao slowly came to Long Haochen's side and sighed. He said, "Child, come with me." As he spoke, he slowly walked to the side of the hall's stairs. He walked very slowly. At this moment, he seemed to have aged a little. Under the gaze of the other powerhouses in the warrior temple, Long Haochen followed Qiu Yonghao up the stairs. At this time, Long Haochen's physical strength had recovered a lot. Before going up the stairs, he first sent Hao Yue back to the Tower of Eternity and then followed Qiu Yonghao upstairs. On the top floor of the warrior temple, in the temple master's office, Qiu Yonghao pointed to the sofa and said, "Sit." Long Haochen looked around the room of the highest leader of the warrior temple and was shocked. Because this place was too simple. There were no decorations in the room. There was a simple table, chair, wooden bookcase, an old sofa, and a wooden bed. That was all. Although this room was 200 square meters, it gave people a very spacious feeling. Qiu Yonghao said indifferently, "When General Yi led the warrior temple, this room was arranged like this. It's still the same even after 100 years. Even the position hasn't been changed." When he first met this warrior temple lord, Long Haochen could feel his fanatical faith in Yi Wushang. "Are you wondering why I miss General Yi so much as the lord of the warrior temple?" Qiu Yonghao looked at Long Haochen in disappointment. Long Haochen didn't say anything. He just nodded his head lightly. "Because I was General Ye's attendant, or rather, General Ye's servant, a companion who grew up with General Yi." Qiu Yonghao's voice was even a little choked. The appearance of the aria of the Goddess of Light had evoked the most painful but also the most beautiful memory in his heart. General Ye's family was very well off. His father was a magistrate. My family was poor. When I was 5 years old, I was bought by my parents to General Ye's house and sold as a slave. I'm 2 years younger than Marshal Yi, so the residents let me follow him as his manservant, and also as his attendant for life. General Yi treated me very well. He never treated me as a servant since I was young. I still remember clearly that when I was only 7 years old, he said to me, "You're my younger brother from now on. I'll protect you." At this point, Qiu Yonghao couldn't control his inner feelings anymore. Tears flowed down his face. This old man, who was already more than 100 years old, was actually crying over the memory of more than 100 years ago. If Long Haochen was more or less dissatisfied with the warrior temple before, he revealed his true feelings after Qiu Yonghao proposed to let him inherit the position of the temple lord. That trace of dissatisfaction also turned into sympathy. General Yi practiced swordsmanship with me. General Yi joined the warrior temple and asked me to join the warrior temple with him. Even on the eve of the battle with the demon emperor, he didn't forget to tell me to train well. At that time, I was only at the 7th rank. If it wasn't for General Yi, I wouldn't be here today. I would only be a servant, living a mediocre life. I really didn't expect to see General Ye's sword shine again today. I know that it's impossible for you to return the sword to the warrior temple. You're right. Only in your hands will this divine sword be able to display the splendor of General Yi of the past. However, I hope that you won't be as impulsive as General Yi. Before your wings grow, you must put your own safety first. Because you don't just belong to yourself anymore. You belong to the Alliance, the hope of all humanity. Yes. Long Haochen stood up and replied respectfully. Qiu Yonghao sighed. I really envy the Knights Templars. My words are always valid. As long as you're willing, the door of the warrior temple will always be open for you. Speaking up to this point, his eyes suddenly lit up. He suddenly had an idea. Long Haochen, what if you take over as the Knights Templars in the future and become the temple lord of the warrior temple? Long Haochen was shocked. Temple lord, you think too highly of me. Qiu Yonghao chuckled and said, That's not impossible. It's not that I think highly of you. It's the ability that you've shown that makes me think highly of you. However, the prerequisite is that you must survive. I heard from Su Zhongliang that you came to the warrior temple for 3 matters. The most important thing had been done. What are the other 2 matters? Long Haochen replied, My companions and I have just received a hunting mission. We're preparing to follow the Yu Yi merchant group into the demon's territory. However, our cultivation is already above the 6th rank. I'm afraid we won't be able to pass the inspection when we leave the southeastern fort. Qiu Yonghao replied, That's simple. I'll just have someone inform them. What's the other matter? Long Houchen went silent for a moment, then briefly explained his encounter in Star Search City. He didn't add any personal feelings to it. He only described the process. The warriors and the demons are fighting a bloody battle. Something like this happened at the rear. Could you please pay attention to it, Temple Lord? Qiu Yonghao frowned. I understand. I'll pay attention to it. Is there anything else you need help from the warrior temple? Long Houchen shook his head. A smile appeared on Qiu Yonghao's face. Then let me give you a big gift. Ah! Long Houchen hurriedly said, Senior, there's no need. The warrior temple has already given me a lot. Allowing me to try the aria of the Goddess of Light is already the most valuable gift you've given me. Not to mention, I also took a meteorite from outer space. Qiu Yonghao smiled mysteriously. This secret is actually on you. However, in this world, only I know about it. Long Houchen curiously looked at the old temple lord. Early in the morning, the Yuyi merchant group's carriage slowly left the southeastern fort and headed towards the demon's territory. After receiving instructions from the warrior temple, the inspection along the way was much more relaxed. Long Houchen and his companions were sitting in a carriage in the middle of the merchant group. Finally, they were about to enter the demon's territory again. They were about to start their new mission. This time, their mood was completely different from the last time they entered the demon's territory. If they were nervous or excited in the past, then they were much calmer now. They also had a confidence that they didn't have in the past. The Yuyi merchant group was rich and imposing. The carriage that Long Houchen and the others were riding in was exactly the same as the one that Yuyi merchant group took when they first entered the demon's territory with Yuyi merchant group. The carriage was spacious and warm. There was even a table and a special cupboard with a large amount of prepared food. Opening the curtain, Long Houchen looked outside. They set off at dawn. By the time they left the southeastern fort, the sky outside had gradually brightened. However, the weather was not very good and the sky was gray. Long Houchen took out a roll of sheepskin map from the Eternal Melody and spread it out on the table in the carriage. The map was densely packed with annotations, which showed the distribution of the various provinces of the demons, as well as the location of the demons and the demon lords in each province. Even the officials of the Temple League might not have such a detailed map. This map was naturally obtained by Yu Yi for Long Houchen. She made a condition, which was that Long Houchen must not give this map to the officials of the Alliance. Long Houchen pointed to a city in the Narik province and said, "This is the capital of the Narik province, and also the place where the demon birds are stationed. Our first mission will be completed here. About tonight, the Yu Yi merchant group will arrive at the demon's border camp. If everything goes well, the merchant group will pass by the Narik province's capital city at noon tomorrow for a simple rest. After the ambush of the Yu Yi merchant group is now very relaxed in the demon's territory. We will take this opportunity to go to Narik City and complete the mission of killing 5 golden demon bird. Then, we will follow the merchant group and continue into the inner regions of the demons." Wang Yuanyuan said, "Captain, if we follow the merchant group into Narik City and assassinate the golden demon birds, will it attract the attention of the demons in Narik City? According to the map, there is a demon lord in Narik City." Long Houchen nodded and said, "It is inevitable to arouse suspicion. However, even if it arouses suspicion, they may not dare to search the merchant group. Even if they search, can we be found?" At this point, he couldn't help but reveal a smile. Wang Yuanyuan suddenly understood and nodded repeatedly. The others couldn't help but reveal smiles on their faces. Yes, it was not easy to find Long Houchen and the others. Why did Long Houchen dare to accept 16 missions, including the difficult mission of killing the 72nd Demon Lord? Apart from confidence in their own strength, the most important thing was that they had a life-saving method that other monster hunters didn't have: the Tower of Eternity. With this shelter, when they encountered a strong enemy, they could completely avoid the brunt of their attacks. A faint light flickered and Long Houchen revealed a cold expression. Good, then the first step of the plan is decided. I will let the Yi merchant group help us determine the location of the golden demon bird. This time, in order to kill them in the shortest time possible, we must split up. Kai and I will each kill a golden demon bird. Lin Xian, you and Han Yu will team up. You will be in charge of killing the golden demon birds with the blue fire phoenix spiritual stove. Han Yu will support you. Yuan Sima, you will each be in charge of killing a golden demon bird. Inger will support you. Yes. Everyone roared in agreement, their eyes filled with excitement. After close to a year of seclusion, they already felt like they were ready to go. There was another chance to hunt demons. Moreover, many of them would be facing the rank 6 demons alone. This was the first time they encountered such powerful creatures, they didn't even dare to think about it. But now they were full of confidence. The process of entering the demon's territory was very smooth. Just as Long Houchen said, the treatment the Yi merchant group received after entering the demon's territory was much better than in the Temple League. Many of the demons already knew that Yi was going to be the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan's crown prince and Demon Emperor's successor's crown princess. Who would dare to carefully inspect the Yi merchant group? Moreover, with the last time the 3 demon gods mobilized an army to plunder the Yi merchant group, they now had a smooth journey no matter where they went. This was also the reason why Long Houchen valued the Yi merchant group. With this umbrella, they could save a lot of trouble. More importantly, the Yi merchant group could also provide him with a lot of important information. It seemed that many of the 16 missions were very difficult, but with the help of the Yi merchant group, their troubles could be reduced by at least a third, and the danger would inevitably be greatly reduced. After successfully passing through the demon's border checkpoint, the merchant group had already entered the Narik province of the demons the next morning. Just as Long Houchen had predicted, they arrived at the Narik province's capital, Narik City, at noon. The merchant group would also temporarily rest here for an hour before continuing their journey. For merchants of the scale of the Yi merchant group, they would not stay in an inn during the process of trading. Living in an inn would undoubtedly increase their expenses and reduce their efficiency. Their carriages were all equipped with tents, and they would rest wherever they went. Therefore, after entering Narik City, they mainly replenished their water and some food. At the same time, they would trade some goods that they had brought to Narik City. 2 hours was enough. There were already people from the Yi merchant group in Narik City. They had already prepared everything and were waiting for them, so that the merchant group's efficiency would be at its highest. Soon, the Yi merchant group stopped in Narik City. After about half a cup of tea's time, the merchant group's steward quietly came to the carriage where Long Houchen and the others were and stuffed a ball of paper into it. Long Houchen opened the paper ball. Inside was a simple map of Narik City, marked with 5 red dots. Long Houchen spread out the map for his companions to memorize, then waved his hand slightly. Everyone quietly got off the carriage and went in different directions. The steward was the person in charge of the Yi merchant group, and also one of Yuye's most trusted people. Before coming to Narik City, Long Houchen had told him to investigate the location of the golden demon bird. He had also made arrangements in advance, so he was able to immediately provide the specific location of the 5 golden demon birds to Long Houchen and the others. The steward chosen by Yi was originally a spy that the Temple League had placed in the Yi merchant group, and he was also a human. Naturally, he was not afraid of anything happening to him. Of course, he only vaguely knew that Long Houchen and the others were monster hunters, but he did not know which monster hunters they were. Long Houchen and the others were dressed similarly. Each of them was covered in a large cloak and wore a hat, so their faces could not be seen. This kind of dressing was not uncommon among the demons, in fact, it was common. This was because the environmental destruction in the demon's territory over the years had caused more sandstorms than in the Temple League's territory. High demons liked to wear this kind of large cloak when they went out. At the same time, the eyes of Long Houchen and the others naturally turned purple, and they were disguised as the Moon Devils. When arranging the operation, Long Houchen's arrangement was very clever. He and Kaer each took one side, while the other 3 targets were in the middle. This way, if there was a problem, they could immediately go to the rescue. With the existence of the soul chain, they would naturally be able to feel the strong attack. Long Houchen walked very fast. This was the first time everyone was separated, and he was still a little worried. He had to complete his task as soon as possible and then go to pick up his friends. This was what he and Kaer had to do. According to the map in his memory, Long Houchen kept going east. Although Nato City was the capital of the Narik province, it was not very big. Most of the people walking on the streets were demons. Of course, low-level demons like the ordinary dual-bladed demons were not allowed to enter the city. When these demons saw Long Houchen's disguise and human form, they all avoided him, not daring to approach him. The reason was simple. Only the high demons were in human form, and they would dress like Long Houchen. Moreover, the demons' perception was more sensitive than that of humans. Although they could not feel Long Houchen's attributes, they could vaguely feel a trace of danger from him. At least subconsciously, they were not willing to approach him. Soon, Long Houchen saw his target. It was a somewhat shabby restaurant, and the sign was crooked. Although the demons occupied most of the celestial demons' continent, the demons were deeply influenced by humans. In particular, the demons liked human food very much. The higher the demons were, the more they enjoyed eating and drinking human food. Therefore, the treatment of humans in the demon race had undergone an earth-shaking change from the Dark Ages 6,000 years ago to the present. Even humans captured from the Temple League would be treated well by the demons. Of course, the premise was that these humans had to surrender. If a chef was captured, the demons would even need to come forward and win him over. The Narik province was located on the border, but it was very poor. Otherwise, the 3 demons would not have dared to send a large army to attack the Yuyi Chamber of Commerce. Here, even if it was just a small restaurant, only the powerful demons were qualified to enjoy it. For example, the small restaurant in front of him looked very dilapidated. There were 4 distinct black marks under the sign. This meant that only demons above grade 4 could enter. This was the class. Long Houchen walked slowly into the restaurant. His eyes swept across the small hall, and he saw his target at a glance. A golden devil bird was sitting in one of the best seats, eating and drinking. There were 4 dishes, and there was even a pot of wine. It looked very leisurely. Because it was noon, there were many demons eating in the dining hall. Most of them were grade 4 and grade 5 demons. There was only one grade 6 golden demon bird. Moreover, its golden skin was so obvious.